Pain of Death by Adam Creed. Read by Jonathan Oliver. Part 1. 1. Staffe sinks to his knees, the ground surprisingly warm here beneath the city. The ponding water leaches into his trousers, and he leans close to the face of the dying woman. In this false light, her skin is the palest blue, almost neon, and her broken lips are strangely bright, like burst plums. He searches for a glimmer of life, but there seems to be none. Then she moans. He could swear she does, so he puts his ear to her mouth, but feels nothing, just his own drumming life within. Water drips. The deep vaults echo the constant murmur of the small generator. A camera clicks, and the crime scene lights buzz. On each of her wrists, he sees a ring of red pressed into the skin, like thick bracelets. A paramedic asks Staffe to move away, and another stands over the woman, drapes a red blanket over her. It covers her body, not the face. "No," says the photographer. "I need to see all of her." Beneath the blanket, the woman is as she was, naked from the waist down, a cotton dress hoisted up around her stomach and breasts. No underwear. A scene of crime officer in plastic overalls removes the blanket and looks away as the photographer tries to capture the scene. "We have to move her," says the doctor, who wears patent purple, chunky heels. Her hair is done up in a swirling twist, and her plastic suit rustles in the subterranean melee. The night she had dressed for was in a different, brighter world. "Then take her," says Staffe, snatching the blanket from the socko. As he replaces the blanket, he sees the smears and clusters of blood, some dried, some fresh. It is all over the down curve of her stomach and her legs, and between. He beckons the paramedics. "We need more time," says the crime scene photographer. Staffe says to the doctor, "I'm sorry, please take her away." The paramedics lift her onto a stretcher, as if she were a Fabergé egg. Written on all their faces is the doomed concentration of people who wish to save lives, who often as not tend the new dead. The doctor places a hand on Staffe's elbow, grips it lightly, saying softly, "She might be all right." They smile weakly at each other. He watches everybody leave, taking their kit with them, the soccos and medics in separate groups. The inspector remains in this tunnel the Victorians earmarked as an underground railway, but it never made it. His chest tightens. Far away, at the bottom of the shaft that delivered them here, the last light disappears, and for a moment all Staffe can hear is his own heart. In the dark, distant, a light flickers. As it slowly grows larger and closer, Staffe sees it is a man approaching. He looks like something from a Hammer film, his eyes intent and narrowed. His bearded jaw juts and his thin lips are dark. There is blood on his hands, and his shirt front too. This is Asquith, secretary of the Underground Victorians, and an amateur historian. He found the dying woman and called the police. Staffe knows he will have to question him. Will have to search for a link between Asquith and the woman, but killers don't call, and if they do, they don't stick around. "Strange," says Asquith. "All my days I've peered into the past, but this is now. They will come here, to the scene of this murder. She's not dead. This will become history." Staffe watches Asquith disappear down the tunnel, towards the streets and libraries, the hospitals and homes. A fat drop of water hits him on the forehead, runs down his face, and a rat scuttles across his shoe. They say you are never more than 12 feet from a rat on the London streets. Beneath, God knows. He tries to imagine what it would have been like for the woman down here. How long had she been below ground? Who had brought her, and why had they done what they did? The blow to the head, the scratch marks on her arms, and all the blood down there, caked on the tops of her thighs and smeared on her stomach. Her lip was lacerated too. The doctor reckoned the woman had probably bitten it through herself. Staffe shivers, pulls his jacket tight as the tunnel becomes coffin black once more, the light from Asquith's torch fading completely. The iron door slams shut again, and he turns on his torch. Its battery's weak. The failing beam stutters as he casts around the scene, flickering on the dark stain of blood where her legs had made their confluence. He makes his way, piecing together a critical path to follow, but catches his boot on a paving slab and falls into the harsh darkness. The wet stone floor rips his hand. He turns the torch on a flap of skin, loose on the soft pad of flesh by his wrist. It stings, and he wonders what might get into the blood. He pushes himself up and walks gingerly towards the iron door, but his torch fails. Staffe gropes for the latch, grazing his fingers and knuckles, eventually heaving open the door. Daylight falls through the shaft like weak water, and for a moment it blinds him. Then he remembers a promise he had made for today. Above ground, it is a fine spring day, a pleasant surprise after the long winter. The city folk are out in shirt-sleeves, bare legs. Staffe carries his jacket slung over a shoulder, past the Earl Marshal, stolen away between the Old Street roundabout and the Limekiln estate. The daytime drinkers are at it, leaning against the pub wall and drawing on their fags, flicking ash and looking the girls up and down. He pats down the loose skin on his hand, grimaces. Jasmine Cash clocks Staffe as soon as he walks into the Limekiln's dirty cloister. Some kids are kicking a ball against a wall. Others skulk on the steps up to the low-rise tenements in the shadow of the Limekiln tower. Jasmine holds her baby on her hip and waves to him. The infant Millie copies. When Staffe gets to Jasmine's flat, mother and daughter have gone inside. He lets himself in and sees Millie jabbing her fingers into the stereo. She stands with her legs wide apart, still in nappies. She chunters to herself in a private language, and her mum joins in, as if she understands. "Tea?" says Jasmine. "How do you keep this place so fine?" says Staffe. "This is Millie's world. It doesn't have to be S-H-I-T in here." Jasmine smiles, winking at Millie. "We'll get out of here soon, but until we do, I can make it fine." Staffe bends down and picks up the child, lifts her right up to the ceiling, and Millie chortles, "Ma scods patalilili," down at him. "Not now, Mill," says Jasmine. "Jadus will sort us out. He will get it, won't he?" "You've got to prepare for the worst." Staffe lowers Millie down, holds her close. She smells of oatmeal. "No way! I prepare for the best. It's how it's going to be." She holds out Staffe's tea, and he places Millie on the floor. "For sure. And all thanks to you." Staffe considered his role in the trial of Jadis Golding, those years ago, and the tribulation since. He must shoulder some blame for the mess that is Jadis's life. "You've put him on your rent book." Jasmine produces the book, beaming all over her face. "He's coming home, I tell you, and we're going to be a family." Staffe takes the book, together with the offer of employment from Jasmine's cousin, who runs an eel and pie shop in Bethnal Green. She says, "He wrote to that post office man just like you said, and he got a letter back. That man's so bitter still. He's got no idea how my Jadis has changed. No idea." Staffe can't think what to say to Jasmine without bursting this bubble. Jadis was in the gang that pulled a gun on that post office manager, ruining his life and his business. 2 years on, and the man still can't sleep nights. He can't ever be a father or a husband the way he was. No surprise that Jadis's letter from the blue left him cold. But that isn't to say the world can't be a better place. Jadis reforming himself. The crime is in the past, the victim with it. Staffe knows the world has to be made better, whatever way we can. You remember what you said, Jasmine? She nods. If he steps 1 foot out, you'll know. I promise. But he won't. Staffe places the documents in the plastic wallet that Jasmine has given him. I'll call you when we're through. He slides in the latest photographs of Millie, too. It might be bad news. It really might, you know. He's learned his lesson. He's ready to be a father and a husband. He's ready to work, says Jasmine, totally unprepared for the parole of her loved one to be denied. How could the board disappoint her? 2. How did Golding's parole hearing go? Asks D.S. Pulford late in the day. What are her chances? Says Staffe, looking past his sergeant to the woman in bed. Against the brilliant white starch of ward linen, the woman seems in a far worse state, as if you can now hear the sub-audio screams of her bruises and cuts in this harsh and clean environment. In the tunnel, it had seemed she might be saved by something like apothecary or faith. Touch and go. More go than touch. Has she said anything? Pulford shakes his head. Both men angle towards the woman. We have had the ID confirmed, sir, from her prints. She's got a record. Strange, isn't it? Pulford's young face looks puzzled, almost cherubic. When they're naked and beaten up, put between those sheets and fed on a drip, their history counts for nothing. Could be hooked on the crack pipe or pulling in $1 million a year in the city. What kind of record does she have? Benefit fraud and ABH. ABH? Against the dad. The dad? There's kids. Oh, yes, but the kids are in care, and the doctors reckon there's another one. They reckon she's had a baby. Just. What? Staffe looks at her, remembers the smeared blood and what he thought were wounds. She had a baby down in the tunnel. Forensics say there was no sign at the scene. Christ! We've got to speak to her. The doctors can't say when that might be. What's she called? Kerry. Kerry Degg. Staffe sits beside the woman, takes her hand in his, careful not to disturb the tubes that tunnel their way into her veins. Life dripping into her, dripping away. What kind of animal would take her down there? Perhaps she went in herself. Forensics say she could have been down a couple of days, but no more. There's no, excrement, Staffe sighs. And when did the baby happen, can they say? They say they need to keep her stable. They can't go into that, not yet, not until she's better, or... Staffe tries to imagine what might make a woman go to such a place to have a baby. And the husband? Sean. They've been married 6 years, since she was 17. He's 36 and clean as a whistle. We'll see about that. Staffe reaches out, squeezes her hand as firmly as he dare, to see if her eyes will flicker or her pulse change. But she is dead to his attentions for now. He studies her, and something stirs inside him. Stripped bare of all makeup, and her jet-black hair combed, he thinks he might know her. How did the parole go, sir? The Jadis scolding thing, is he coming out? Staffe looks at Kerry Degg, clinging on to life, having issued life, having had cause to attack Sean Degg, her husband of 6 years, having been deemed unfit to hold on to her own children. He turns his gaze to his young sergeant. "Do you ever doubt what we do is for the best?" Sean Degg hunches by Kerry's hospital bed, whispering constantly into his wife's ear under the watchful gaze of a uniformed police officer, a nurse, and D.I. Will Wagstaff. He keeps his hand flat and gentle on her stomach. Tears pop from his eyes and run freely down his cheeks. He doesn't sob or wail, but when he is done, he says to the nurse, "I came here thinking she would be gone, but she's not. You think she'll be all right, don't you?" The nurse is young with golden hair and a constantly cheerful face. She looks at Staffe, then at the uniformed officer, making her smile as thin as she can. Sean says to the nurse, "Am I wrong?" "She's been through a lot." Staffe says, "And what about the baby, Sean?" The nurse says, "You come with me, Mr. Degg. You look all done in. We'll have someone take a look at you." "I'll need a word first," says Staffe. Sean says, "I don't know about a baby." "Is there a baby?" He looks confused. Or is he afraid? "I haven't seen Kerry for months." "You deserted her?" says Staffe. "The other way round. With Kerry, it's always the other way round." "I'm taking him to see a doctor," says the nurse, raising her eyebrows and crossing her arms under her breasts. "He needs attention." Staffe looks at Kerry Degg, splayed on the bed with only tubes drawing the line between her and a fast, certain death. He rues her silence, says to the nurse, "No, he's coming with me. I'll bring him back to you as soon as I'm done. He'll survive." "Did you want another baby, Sean? I don't suppose you did. Already got 2 in care," says Staffe, in the interview room at Ledengate Station, just a stone's throw from the City Royal Hospital, and in the company of duty solicitor Stan Buchanan. Buchanan says, quite mechanically, "You have already been advised that Mrs. Degg left my client months ago when she was still pregnant, and he hasn't seen her since. He can account for his actions and his whereabouts ever since she departed the marital home on, Buchanan leafs wearily through his notes. "It was the 6th of January. I was taking the Christmas decorations down, and she had someone to see." "Why did she beat you up, Sean?" Buchanan nods at Sean, who says, "It wasn't the first time. Sometimes she's not herself." "Why didn't you keep the children, Sean?" "I chose Kerry. I love her, I always have. Nobody else can look after her." "And the children can look after themselves?" "I could only do so much." "Well, not so much if you left her." "She left me." "Oh, I'm sorry. And what exactly did she leave you for?" Sean shrugs. "If you love her as much as you say, you'd have bloody well found out where she went. She didn't stray far by the look of things." Sean Degg looks Staffe straight in the eye, says nothing. His lip quivers. Staffe can tell one kind of fear from another, and he senses that this is a man who does not fear for his liberty. Sean Degg looks like a man who knows something but can't be harmed any more. "I'll get to the bottom of you, believe me. In the meantime, can you confirm that you're still living on Flower and Dean?" He nods. Staffe immediately registers who, living in that vicinity, is in his debt, says, "And you'll remain there and cooperate fully with our inquiries, and fill out this log of your whereabouts morning, afternoon and night since the 6th of January?" Sean nods, utterly resigned. "You can return to the hospital. I have to advise you to seek medical treatment when you get there. Your wife's nurse will arrange it for you." "Thank you, Inspector," says Sean Degg, standing. "The children, Sean. Are they yours?" "I raised them as my own, as far as I could, but no, they're not." "You're registered as the father. Are you saying that Kerry has been having an affair throughout your marriage?" "Not an affair. And it doesn't mean I can't love her." "And this latest baby, was it yours?" Sean Degg looks away. Staffe puts down the phone and scribbles "the Earl" on his blotter, then looks at the pile of papers that his accountant is screaming for, management figures for his property portfolio. A part of him wishes he had sold up when his city friend of old, Finbar Hare, had urged him to do so. But what would he do with the money? "Have you got a minute, sir?" Josie Chancellor helps herself to the chair opposite Staffe and begins to read the preliminary forensic findings from the tunnel. As she reads, she winds strands of her shoulder-length, smooth brown hair around her fingers. "Only one blood type? Kerry Degg's." "And no signs of a placenta," says Staffe. "Not a sausage. There's no sign of a birth down there. The scene was cleaned up spick and span. We're checking all the hospitals, but what Sean said is true, sir. Kerry Degg is on our missing persons list from the 10th of January. "Well, that doesn't make what he said true. I assume he was the one who reported her missing." "He did." She pushes the papers across the desk and leans back, brushing her hair from her face. "Why have you got it in for Sean Degg?" "I've got it in for whoever put that woman down there. For whoever knocked her up and abandoned her. I've seen nothing to tell me he didn't do those things, unless you know who else might have." "Well, she's the promiscuous one by the sound of it. She's the mother who let her kids go into care and got herself knocked up again." "If there's two sides to this story, let's hope she gets to tell hers." "Well, she's a victim. Doesn't mean he can't be too." Staffe smiles, stands up. "Where'd you get all that wisdom from, Chancellor? Let me buy you a drink." "Have you forgotten?" "What?" "It's Pulford's party tonight. His new place." Josie shakes her head slowly, smiling. "You should know. You used to be his landlord. Surely you're coming." "Oh, of course I'm coming," says Staffe, lying. "Doesn't mean we can't have a quick sharpener, though." "Where are you suggesting we go?" "You'll see," said Staffe, dialing reception. "John, have you got that search warrant for the Deggs place?" "Good." "You said a drink." "And I meant it." "But Sean won't be there. He's gone back to the hospital." On the way out, Staffe picks up the pile of paper for his properties, tugs out the bottom drawer of his filing cabinet with the toe of his Chelsea boot, dropping in all the accounts and leases and variations. It makes a metallic thud, and he kicks the drawer shut fast. As he leaves, he feels life flutter in his chest. The prospect of the ordeal ahead makes him glow, like a chance meeting with someone you secretly adore. This reaction is not something he admires in himself. The Earl Marshal sits as proud as it can in the shadow of the mid-rise, late-Victorian limekiln tenements. The limekiln tower looms above. The pub hasn't been knocked about with any vigour in over 100 years. The rooms are separated by etched glass panels, and the spring sun floods in through smeared, ceiling-high windows. The swagged, heavy drapes look like they haven't been cleaned since they buried Queen Victoria, and the red-topped veneered tables are sticky with glass rings and weeks of spilled beer. There is a smell of dog, and the punters are sitting down rather than standing at the bar. They sit on their own and look into their pints and chasers, or at their shoes, or into the racing pages. Sean Degg, however, is talking animatedly to a tall, sharp-dressed man 10 years his junior, Ross Dennis. Sean Degg doesn't know that in a recent phone call, Ross fingered the Earl as Degg's local. And to preserve this deceit, Dennis takes his leave, edging away from Degg towards the door. He will wait for Staffe in a car down on Jellicoe, the other way from Degg's place on Flower and Dean. Josie says, "How did you know he'd be here?" Staffe nods towards the man leaving the pub by the side door. "Ah, Ross Dennis. You've still got your paw on his tail." Staffe takes a step towards the bar, and everyone looks up. The side door slams shut. Sean Degg clocks Staffe, who takes the warrant from his pocket and waves it at Degg. "Thought you were desperate to get to the hospital, Sean. Finish your drink and take me to your place." "You're harassing me." "I'm protecting the public, and that involves going through your home. If your wife doesn't recover, it'll be murder, according to our legal department. Whoever took her down there left her to die, and we won't be settling for anything less. There's a baby's life here, too." "I haven't seen her for 3 months. 88 days, by my reckoning." Staffe puts his hand heavily upon Sean Degg's shoulder, and Kerry's husband tenses up, blinking. Staffe knows everybody in the pub has him down as a copper, so he leans right up against Degg, whispers in his ear, "I'll see you back at yours in 10 minutes. Get the kettle on, eh?" And he pushes a folded £20 note into Sean Degg's shirt pocket, for everyone to see. Dennis is in the driver's seat of his Audi A4, dragging on a Benson's and listening to some high-revving dance music. "Nice motor, Ross. Things must be rosy for you just now," says Staffe, sliding into the passenger seat, turning down the music. Dennis turns the music back up. He says, "That's my business. We had an understanding. I'll be the judge of that. What can you tell me about our friend Sean?" "He's a fucking loser, man. He loves that slag, and if you ask me, he wouldn't harm a hair. But he did say something." "And what's that?" "Are we even?" "I guess so, if it puts him on the hook." "What if it gets him off the hook?" "Let's have it, Ross." Dennis powers up the engine and toys with the accelerator. The throaty surges of power clash with the dance beats. "He was desperate for her to have that baby. Reckoned it was his. You know the other two aren't." "How do you know it was his?" "Oh, she beat him up. Proper mashed him. Used a wheel nut spanner on him when she found out she was knocked up. Said it was his fault. She must have given herself a couple of months off from sleeping around, or stuck to giving head, or... All right, I get the picture. Muppet reckoned the social will let them keep this one on account it was both of theirs. He's in pieces, man. I kind of feel sorry for him, you know. And he loves her, you better believe that. Sad fucker." Sean's house on Flower and Dean is a modern urban infill house from the 80s. Inside, Kerry Degg is everywhere. Framed and posed, black and white portfolio photographs, colour shots of her on stage with jet black hair and showing silk and flesh. Staffe walks across to the laminated kitchen pier and lifts his mug of tea, delves into Sean's shirt pocket for the £20 note. "They all think I'm in your pay now," says Sean. "You're going to have to tell the truth then. Don't want both sides of the law holding it against you." Staffe picks up one of the many framed photographs of Kerry. She pouts into camera with her face tilted up and a hand gripping her head, one foot up on a piano stool, showing her legs off. She wears a tight-bodiced slit dress. The look is unmistakably burlesque. "Kerry's a singer." Staffe looks around the flat. Its interior contradicts the building it is in and its locale. Hippie scarves hang from light fittings, and theatre prints and record sleeves adorn the walls. Patchouli is ingrained, and all the LPs are alphabetized, from Oleta Adams to Frank Zappa. An eclectic mix of blues and soul, jazz and vaudeville. In the kitchen, an optic rack holds pastis, Tanqueray and Havana Club. Over the years, Staffe has been in many houses and flats, bedsits and squats. None quite like this. He pulls open a drawer and suggests to Josie that she makes a start on the bedroom. "These things are precious to us. This is our life," says Sean. Staffe picks up a flyer for a show last October at the Boss Clef. Laurie was her stage name. That's right. He does know her. On the flyer is written Laurie dos Passos. Below the photograph of Kerry, pouting, does burlesque. And for sure, Kerry's performances were risque. Staffe had seen that for himself in the drunken hinterland of the final break-up from Sylvie. Josie calls down from the bedroom, and he goes up, telling Sean to sit down and keep his hands off everything. Standing in front of a whole wall of opened wardrobes, Josie says, "This lot doesn't come cheap. Christ, why do they live in a place like this?" "Because they spend all their cash on Kerry's career," says Staffe, running his hand along the rails of sequined, brilliantly coloured silk and satin dresses, skirts and blouses. Above, hats and scarves. Below, neat pile after neat pile of corsets and knickers, bras and belts. "And it might have been about to pay off," says Josie. "That burlesque is all the rage, you know. Look at this. It was in a bedside drawer." Staffe takes the letter. An acknowledgement of receipt of contract from Rendezvous Enterprises. Philip Ramone runs the two most successful clubs in Soho, and has seemingly offered Kerry a residency at Rendezvous. 1,500 quid a week. "What a shame," says Josie. "Just as she was about to break through." "Into motherhood again," says Staffe, storming back towards the lounge. He takes a deep breath before going in, walks slowly towards where Sean sits. He wants to lift him up by the throat and launch him into the wall, see what the weasel would say under real duress. But he forces himself to concoct another way. "Were you going to look after the baby, Sean?" "How do you mean?" "Different, when the biological father's intent on giving it a home. And things picking up, too, with Kerry's career. This one was yours, wasn't it?" Staffe sits alongside Sean, puts his big hand on Sean's small, bony knee. "He'd make a good dad, Sean. That's my guess. And all the support you've given Kerry over the years. She was growing away from you, wasn't she?" He looks around the room. "Getting too big for all this." "I don't know what she's done with the baby. Honest, I don't." "There is no baby, is there, Sean? Kerry had her career to think about." "I helped her every inch. Not that I got anything out of it, but she's worth it. She's special." "I know. I've seen her." Staffe takes the Boss Clef flyer from his pocket. "I was there that night, some show. You wouldn't have guessed she had your child inside her." "Oh, shut up." "And I wouldn't have guessed she'd have beaten up her husband, so bad he had to call the police." "I asked for it." "What exactly did you ask for, Sean? You said you didn't get anything out of her. Why should you?" "I curated her. I found her and developed her. I saw what nobody else did, before it was even there." "You curated her?" "It's what I do. I just wanted her to love me, that's all." "They say you should never marry too good." "Oh, that's shit. You got no choice who you love." "But Kerry did."
She loves me, all right. In ways you'll never understand. We'll always be together. She knows that.
I'll understand, Sean. Don't worry about that. Josie comes in, swinging a clutch of clear plastic bags. Driving licence, passport, bank details. She hadn't planned to be away for long. Not exactly doing a runner, was she? You could have told us that, couldn't you, Sean, but you decided to withhold on us. Staffe stands up, looks down at Sean Degg and holds out his hand. Josie unclips the cuffs.
I never touched her. I never could. I never could.
Staffe goes down onto his knees and takes a hold of Degg's chin with finger and thumb. If that's so, there's nothing to worry about. And nothing to fear from the truth, which you'd better start spewing up. Because if you don't, and if Kerry never comes round to give her side of the story, you'll be going to a dark place.
I don't say that, says Degg. I can't do time. I can't.
3. As soon as the uniformed officers had arrived at Flower and Dean to take Sean Degg back to Ledengate Station, Staffe walked back to City Royal to see how Kerry Degg was progressing. He sits alongside her, hoping with everything he can muster that she pulls through. Lying there, with her greasy hair combed straight and her skin deathly white, and her broken lip butterfly-stitched, you could not compute that she lives her life upon a stage, that her house is adorned with such exotica, that she can estrange her own children. Her chances are slim. Staffe turns quickly as a dark-haired nurse pulls up a chair. She has olive-coloured skin, smooth as Wedgwood, and dark eyes. She is solemn. The nurse says, soft and northern, "How on earth will you find the baby?" "We have alerted all the hospitals and clinics." "How did she get down there? After she'd given birth? Your sergeant told me about the tunnel." "My sergeant should watch his tongue. He seems a decent sort. He said he was having a party." "And no doubt he invited you?" Now the nurse smiles. "As a matter of fact, he did." She looks at Kerry Degg. "It doesn't seem right. Not tonight." "You can't have that attitude in your job, surely?" "Sometimes it gets to you. It's awful to see a mother and no child." "A party might take your mind off it." "Are you going?" "I have to." "You make it sound like a chore." "What's your name?" "Nurse Delahunty." "Eve." "I'm Staffe." "Ah, I heard," says Nurse Eve. Pulford's flat is in the eaves of a Victorian townhouse, and Staffe is pleasantly surprised at the turnout. Pulford has never been the most popular of sergeants, on account of his fast-track progress, courtesy of a degree in history, but there is a smattering of officers from Ledengate, and a couple of dozen others who are patently not police. He has laid on an impressive spread, with a full range of spirits and a dustbin full of beers on ice. Some kind of northern soul morphs with house. The young people represent a side of Pulford he never saw when the young sergeant lived at Staffe's flat in Queen's Terrace. "We brought Degg in," he says to Pulford, as he gives Staffe and Nurse Eve a tour of 3 small rooms. "I never said. Not properly." Pulford is the worse for wear, has lipstick on his face. "How grateful I am, sir." "Shut up." "No." He turns to Nurse Eve. "He took me in when nobody else wanted to know. I was up to here." He raises a hand to the ceiling. "But I'm all over that shit now. I'm all set, and it's thanks to him. Have a beer, sir." "Just one," says Staffe. Nothing worse than being amongst the half-cut. He thinks this might be the first party he's been to since he split with Sylvie. He sits on the edge of the bed, alongside Nurse Eve, and Pulford brings their drinks, gets pulled away by a drunk girl who looks about 18. "She was into burlesque," he says. "Kerry."
"I've never been."
"Well, you should."
"It's strange. When they come to us in states like that, they could be into anything and we'd never guess."
"They could be guilty of anything."
"Cynic," she says, laughing.
When she laughs, her eyes glisten, and the flesh between her eyes crinkles. Staffe thinks Nurse Eve should laugh more. He thinks she has a good spirit, has sadness close by. He also thinks that she is unlike Sylvie, that she lacks Sylvie's confidence. And he wonders if he has a type.
"I should leave you alone. You look as if you have some thinking to do."
"I have, but I don't want to." He raises his bottle, clinks it against her wine-glass. "So, you've never been to burlesque? You should try it." Josie turns away from Sean Degg, who is disconsolate in the holding cell. She says to John Baugh, "Do you want me to do it?" "Oh, you look done in, leave him to me. It's a withholding charge, you say." Josie beckons John Baugh outside, keeping an eye on Sean Degg, who looks as if he might be coming down from something. She whispers,
"Staffe wants to leave him a few hours. Keep Buchanan away from him and let him stew. He knows more than he's letting on."
John Baugh looks into the cell. "Is he on something?"
"Could be."
"I'll run a piss test on him, that'll buy some time. You get yourself home, it's been a rough day." Josie lets herself out the back of the station into the car park. She thinks she hears something. An animal, or possibly something human. She can sense a presence. She sniffs the air, thinking it might be a crafty fag being had. No smell. But something is moving in the car park. She can feel it, and peers into the corner of the yard where the bins are kept, listening intently. This time of night, the car park is less than half full. Josie makes her way slowly to the far wall, which adjoins Cloth Fair. She shines her torch along the gap between the parked cars and the wall and hears a shriek, then a scamper of padding feet. Her heart pounds, then stops. The cat jumps onto a ledge, up onto the high wall and beyond into the night. Josie's heart starts up again, and she laughs to herself. Pure relief. She switches off her torch and makes her way towards the pedestrian gate. A car draws along Cloth Fair, its headlight beams sweeping towards Josie, then away. She sees it. She isn't going mad. At the foot of the railings, wrapped in a tea towel, the baby seems blue. Its eyes are shut, tight. Its lips are white. The silence of the tiny creature makes Josie's heart pound harder this time, and for several moments she is frozen. She kneels down, the ground sharp on her bare knees. Her hands shake as she lifts the baby into her breast. She presses her cheek to its head and whispers into the baby's ear, soft as skin, "Please, God, please don't. Please, God, please be all right." She rocks and holds her breath and searches for the baby's temple with her finger, holding her breath still deeper, that she may sense a pulse or feel the whisper of breath. But nothing. Her stomach yawns. She wants to scream and curse whoever did this. She holds the baby tighter, struggling to her feet and walking towards the back door, not knowing whether to go fast or slow. And then it happens. The baby screams. Into her ear. Deep and hurt, the baby screams with every surge of blood and well of air from its egg-sized lungs. A last despairing cry to be saved. Josie slumps to the ground and rocks back and forth, holding the baby's head in the palm of her hand. When they come, Jumbo kneeling beside her and trying to prise the baby away, Josie won't let go. Simply says, over and over until the ambulance arrives, "For the grace of God! For the grace of God!" And even then, she won't let the paramedics take the baby without her going too, quite convinced that this baby will surely die if it is taken from her sight. The wine has made Eve loose. Her hair is ruffled and her eyeliner is smudged, as are her words. Her smile comes easy and she speaks faster, her northern accent thicker now. She toys with her glass and supports her chin with the palm of her hand, looks up at Staffe as if he is the only person in the room. But she'd done the same with the doorman and the waiter. On the way, she told him how she came to London 4 years ago with a friend. She hated it, but it's not so bad now, and she can't imagine herself ever going back. Staffe watches the act up on the stage. They're at a small table in the Boss Clef. The audience is hemmed into the stage by a horseshoe of red drapes. He thinks, how refreshing, that she knows he is a copper, but hasn't delved at all into his job, or his life. At the end of the song, Eve spins on her seat, joins in the applause, and leans into him, her lips on his ear, and whispering, "We haven't talked about you at all, have we? But I know." She pulls away. "No?" The applause subsides, and Eve picks up a glass and finishes her vodka and soda. "Your sergeant told me all about you." Staffe's instinct is to tell her that he's really not got his head round his ex, that he's actually not made love since then and has barely had the inclination. Suddenly, he knows he should see Sylvie. It's the least she deserves, an explanation. Perhaps she deserves to never see him again. What does he know? "He told me about your ex." "Sylvie?" He likes the word in his mouth. "Let's not talk about her." She finishes her wine. He wants to tell Eve he is too old for her. Suddenly, in his battered leather jacket and his boot-cut jeans and his grown-out hair and his day's growth, he feels the full weight of his years. He looks at his mineral water and Eve's empty glass, and gestures to the waiter, asks for another vodka and a Lafroig. "A large one." "Don't drink on my behalf," she says, straight-faced. "Not unless you want to." Her face cracks into a smile, and she slaps his leg, says, "Let's dance." She nods to the small gap between the stage and the front line of tables, enough room for a few people to shuffle. Nobody is dancing. Eve stands and holds out her hand towards Staffe. His heart sinks, and he looks around the room. He knows what he would think of a man like him dancing in public. She tugs him, and he surrenders to it. He lets her lead him between the tables, and he smiles apologetically, in case anybody cares to look. He feels the heat of the stage lights on him. The singer raises her hands and claps, smiles at Eve, whose hips draw figures of 8. Staffe doesn't know where to put his hands, what to do with his feet. But Eve reaches out and takes his hand and winds herself around him, under his arm and twirling in his grasp. By the end of the song, there are a dozen people on the dance floor. When they get back to the table, the drinks have come. Staffe pours some water into his whiskey and feels his phone vibrate. He should ignore it. "You're ringing," says Eve. "You should answer. I understand." 4. Even in the dead of night, Keller Ward is bright and clean. It smells of talcum powder and warm milk. Brightly coloured animals romp across the walls in primary colours, and the distant reprise of cartoon soundtracks swoons through the halls of new life, like lullabies. It is a world away from Kerry Degg's small room, just a couple of corridors away. However, in a room built for one tiny human, a row of glum people huddle along one wall. A uniformed officer, a doctor and a nurse, who Staffe recognises from Kerry's ward, the one with the golden hair. DC Josie Chancellor sits by the plastic-domed cot. Within the germ-free bubble is the baby they have called Grace. The DNA has been sought and is being analysed, but the outcome is widely predicted. Baby Grace is the daughter of Kerry Degg. The father, that remains to be seen. "I found her, sir," says Josie, looking up with wide eyes, her kohl bled black in Gothic zags down to her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Josie. I should have dealt with Degg myself." "No," says Josie. Her eyes are glazed and her lips are plump, blood red. "If anything had been different about tonight, I wouldn't have found her. She won't go home. We keep telling her," says the nurse. "She was so light, like lint, and she screamed for me. It was the most beautiful thing." Josie turns towards him, and Staffe wraps her up in a tight embrace. "Sir, it was the most beautiful thing." He thinks he must smell of drink and the club, and maybe scent. "Thank God you went out when you did." "John Boy got a call, sir. About 2 minutes after I found the baby. It sounded like a woman, but he couldn't be sure. They were talking through some kind of device. We're having the tape analysed." "Where was the call made from?"
"A prepaid mobile. No chance of a trace."
"They told John about the baby?"
"Described the exact place. Said to call an ambulance, that the baby wasn't taking its food properly and she was ill."
"Why wouldn't they take it to a hospital?"
"A police station's the next best thing. You know how quiet the city is at night. They must have passed her through the railings. Might even have been on their way here and lost their nerve, or got spooked by something."
"And Sean Degg was here. He couldn't have brought her, not personally."
"I thought she was dead. But she screamed. Another few minutes. They say she may die still. Who would leave her like that?"
Josie pushes Staffe away and turns to the plastic bubble, staring intently at the baby, naked save a nappy that swamps her. Her eyes are shut, tight. Her tummy swollen, and her ribs push against her blue-white skin. She has a swirl of matted black hair that winds around the crown of her head.
"She has nails. Have you seen, sir? She has nails, and she can kick her legs, and she held onto my finger. She made a fist."
The nurse says, "Her brain is growing. Even in sleep, babies learn about their world." She smiles, beaming. "It's proven." In the corridor, the ward sister tells Staffe that the baby's depositor had ensured the baby was fed and wore a disposable nappy of the Mama-Papa range. The doctors reckon she is a couple of days old and is very weak, quite probably premature. The baby has a chest infection and her heart is weak. "Consistent with being born in a cold, damp environment," Staffe says. The sister nods.
"I've heard about the woman, Degg. If she's the mother, you will find the bastards that did it, won't you?"
We might already have them, he thinks. Staffe can't get his head round what might possess Sean Degg to be involved in treating his only child in such a way. He decides he needs Pulford, that his party will have to be interrupted. He makes the call, tells his sergeant to pour some coffee down and to get a taxi to Flower and Dean, meet him there in an hour. And he makes his way to Ledengate to get the key off Sean Degg. In the corridor, a commotion erupts outside Baby Grace's private room. A doctor runs past them, and when they look back, Josie is being led from the room in the clutches of a nurse. In the clean and brittle hospital air, a silence descends, into which the high-pitched squeal of a cot-side monitor begins to soar. Sean Degg is beginning to look as if he hasn't slept in a long time. The skin under his eyes sags. His face is grey, and he stares into his clasped hands. Stan Buchanan comes in and sits alongside him. He chews on gum, but the stain of the night is still thick in his air. Sean Degg says, "They told me a baby was found. A girl." "We'll be needing your key, Sean." "Why?" "I don't need to give you a reason. We have the warrant." "Something has happened," says Sean. "The baby might not survive. She has an infection." Sean puts his head in his hand, says, "What do you know about the baby?" "We'll check her out. Someone will be in for your DNA." "Is she mine? Mine and Kerry's?" "All I know is we won't rest until we find who left Kerry down in that tunnel, and who dumped that baby. So you better tell us now, everyone she knows, anyone who hated her." "Nobody hated her." "Then who loved her?" says Staffe. "You can love someone too much, can't you, Sean? What about family?" Sean looks at his feet, looks cagey. "You want me to do your job for you?" "You want us to find who did that to Kerry, don't you?" "And you'll release me if I help?" "He should be with his wife," says Buchanan. "Tell us," says Staffe. "She has a sister, Bridget," says Sean. "Or maybe Kerry went to stay with her when she left you." "They don't get on." "Where does she live?" Staffe hands him a piece of paper and a pen. "And what about any friends Kerry has, special friends?" Sean shakes his head. "I'd be the last to know. I always was." "Why did you stay with her?" "Because I can't leave her. I tried once, but I can't be without her." "My client has cooperated fully," says Buchanan. "His wife is in hospital, and there is no evidence that he has had any contact with her since he reported her missing nearly 3 months ago. He hasn't had a proper meal. So take him, Stanley," says Staffe. "Take him for a pub breakfast in Smithfield Market. John will sign him out." Staffe looks at the address for Kerry Degg's sister, Bridget Lamb. 16, The Green, Thames Ditton. "Shit," he says. He knows the house, less than half a mile from where he grew up. It is a smart place, a different world from Flower and Dean. As he drives to Degg's house, he rings Josie. Her voice sounds gluey, and he can tell she's been crying. "How is the baby?" he asks. "They've put her on life support. They say they can't increase the dosage for the infection. She can't take it." "Try and get some sleep, Josie." "Good night, sir." It is a bright spring morning. Staffe flips through his notebook, runs his finger down to the name of Paul Asquith of the Underground Victorians. He calls the number, apologises for the hour, but needn't have worried. When he asks if Asquith would mind terribly helping him with a further investigation of the Smithfield Tunnel, the amateur historian actually gasps with uncontained pleasure. The deeper Staffe scratches at Sean's house, the more he realises that he isn't close to understanding Kerry Degg, née Kilbride. Apart from a book collection, which includes first editions of Philip K. Dick and Angela Carter, he soon uncovered notebooks full of poems and sketches, untravelled charts of life-affirming journeys, by foot, across the continents of Africa, Asia and South America. There were self-scrolled vocab books for Spanish and French, and he flicked through the Spanish one, gleaned from the familiar shapes of the foreign words that she was of an intermediate standard. He sits cross-legged by her desk in the bedroom and reads her poems, soon gathers that they follow two themes: the futility of the search for a perfect love and the loneliness of her childhood. Staffe doesn't know how long he has been here, reaching into this dying stranger's life, but when he hears a creak in the hall, he looks at his watch, realises he will be late for Asquith. Without looking up, he says, "You done, Pulford?" The springs on the bed behind him heave, and when he looks up, he sees not Pulford's long legs or trendy sculpted hair, but the hunched and emaciated frame of Sean Degg, who talks to the floor. "She never let me into her notebooks, and I never looked. I could have, but I didn't. Nobody knows her like I do. Does she write me in a bad light?" Staffe closes the book. He can't work Sean Degg out. To look at him, you might think he's a low-life loafer, scruffily dressed and unkempt. But the things he says suggest someone else. In this job, it sometimes pays to think ill of people. It's an instinct. So she did write ill of me. She writes ill of herself, and of love and her childhood. If it is her wish that you don't read them, you wouldn't want me to say any more than that. But I wouldn't say she wrote ill of you. I couldn't ever harm her. Before, you said you curated Kerry. I've always worked in performance. I went to university, you know. I studied stage design. Where do you curate? Residencies, tours, one-off nights. Staffe tries to disguise his scepticism, says, "Tell me about her father." Because I'm older than her. Well, she was 16 when you met. And I was 29. You think that's sick, do you? It's unusual, but not sick. I couldn't stay at the hospital. It was too much. You think this baby is yours? They said she might die. The baby or Kerry? I have a feeling one of them will be taken from me. I asked you about her father. I don't know him. Staffe watches as Sean looks away. He can tell when a man is lying, but has a lesser instinct for the truth. He gathers together what he feels he needs and makes a list, hands it to Sean, returning the rest of Kerry's possessions to her desk. Degg looks at the list. Notebook, red. Notebook, blue. School records. Doctor's notes. Sundry photographs times 12. He doesn't look up or reply when Staffe bids him farewell. What exactly are we looking for? Whispers Pulford to Staffe, straining to see beyond the 20-foot beam from his head torch. Paul Asquith marches ahead, carrying a larger lamp, casting a wider beam far into the dark. He strides confidently into the Spitalfields tunnel where he had discovered Kerry Degg. We'll have to watch him, Staffe whispers. You don't think... Staffe raises a finger to his lips and glares at Pulford. The ethanol afterburn of the sergeant's party is strong. As they follow Asquith, Staffe ponders quite what sequence of events might have brought Kerry Degg to this place, having had her baby already. Could that be possible? When they reach the spot where Kerry Degg had been found, with its dark stains illuminated by Paul Asquith's powerful torch, Staffe says to the historian, "Where would you hide something from here?"
There is a series of spurs. Some were trial tunnels, others to accommodate machinery. We haven't actually finished mapping them. The documentation isn't what it might be.
But you have maps. Asquith smiles proudly and holds up a clipboard to which he has taped a plastic envelope. He shows it to Staffe.
The red-hatched areas are what we sourced from the original documents.
And the yellow?
That was our mission, to verify these minor tunnels and spurs.
And we are here. Staffe points to a red area. Asquith nods, sagely. Knowing what you do of the system down here, and if you had brought someone down here, say, a week ago, and wished their presence to be untraceable, where would you store the provisions and secrete the traces of life?
Food and water and ablutions? I can't be sure, but there is a link 100 yards or so to the west. It is in some documents, but not others.
Is it safe? Asked Pulford.
This could have been a station. That's what I think, but they chose Aldgate. Is it safe? We shall see.
Pulford takes a step away from Asquith's arc of light, holds Staffe's sleeve and tugs, waits until Asquith has advanced beyond earshot. He hisses,
They could be down here still.
Who?
We have an officer on the door. Nobody has come out. If they were down here when you answered Asquith's call, doing whatever they were doing with Kerry Degg, they could still be here. They would have to be.
Asquith turns 30 yards ahead, says, I am willing to take my chances. And so am I, says Staffe, who turns to Pulford, says, Go back above ground. Start phoning around everyone in Kerry's address book. And check out all the underground Victorians. I'll be up when we're done here.
Are you sure you want to go further down there?
I'll be fine, Pulford. Go on. Staffe feels his chest tighten as he watches the shape of his sergeant fade to nothing, his light dying. Just him and Asquith left. 1 map, 2 torches, and God knows how many tunnels. Five. DCI Pennington slaps his rolled-up telegraph in the palm of his hand with a steady beat. He has a smile on his face as he approaches Pulford's desk. Opposite, Josie's desk is empty. She is at the hospital, but must have left baby Grace at some point the previous evening, because, as is proven by the unfolding in Pennington's newspaper, the national papers had photographed her, palpably worn by events. She looks straight into camera, beneath the headline, Blue Angel, WPC saves abandoned baby. For once, the press regards us kindly, says Pennington, ever aware of the political aspects of his job. A smile forms on his gaunt face.
It's wrong, though, says Pulford. The baby is not saved yet. She's on life support.
Pennington turns the pages, trails a finger along the columns, and taps the newsprint where his own name is writ. As I say, had DC Chancellor not found the baby and acted with such professional instincts, baby Grace would be dead now. She gave that baby a chance.
But I know her, sir. She'll blame herself if anything happens to the child.
Pennington reinstates his resolute exterior. We'll have a chat with her now. How's the investigation going? He looks around the room. And where's Staffe? He's not in his office. Pulford feels a pang of dread, having left Staffe down in the tunnel with that spooky amateur historian Asquith. Pennington sits in Josie's chair, looking across the shared desk at Pulford. I hear the husband is the father. Not so for the other kids. If she was going to get rid, he could have held her against her will. You can tell this Deg that if he confesses, he will not get a rough ride. The public will be with him. It's a saved baby we're talking about, and he played his part. Do you understand?"
"Have you spoken to Deg, sir?"
"No."
"I don't think he could harm Kerry Deg."
"I've read the notes. He was saving the baby, not harming the mother. Think positive, Pulford. Now, where did you say Staffe was?"
"I don't know, sir."
Staffe lies in the dark. He is flat to the cold, damp ground, imagining what it would have been like for Kerry Deg. Rats scuttle, and he sniffs at the putrid air, wonders how long you could stand it down here, let alone with new life growing inside you every second, every minute, getting closer to that moment when another human pushes and strains and finally punches their way out of you and into the world. He is at a low, tight dead end within the petering network of tunnels. According to Asquith, the engineers may have decided the geological substructure was wrong here. Asquith had suggested that money, or lack of it, might have had a part to play in abandoning plans for a station on this part of what became the Metropolitan line, a line along which they generally cut and covered, rather than burrowed. Staffe's breathing is constricted, and he twists over, looks across at the array of plastic bags. He can't help sniffing. The bags hold the detritus from weeks, maybe months. Drink cartons, vitamin supplements, rotted fruit skins, takeaway dishes, and shit. Human shit. He is exhausted and slides his way out of this low enclave. From what they have discovered, he is certain that Kerry Deg didn't have the baby above ground and then come down here. Staffe picks up the plastic bags, trying not to inhale the smell as he makes his way out. The uniformed officer at the entrance to the tunnel looks at him oddly as he passes, watching Staffe put the bags in the footwell of his Peugeot, then open all the windows. He places a smaller bag on the front seat. It holds what looks like dried-out offal. He suspects it might be the placenta, from the little he knows of such human biology. And they found an iron loop, low down on the wall at the dead end of the furthest tunnel. It could have been used to restrain Kerry. It would account for the bracelet marks on her wrists. What must it have been like for her? She's strong. He thinks she will survive, speculates as to what kind of a tale she will tell. Jadis Scolding sits in a wing-backed chair looking out across the Limekiln estate and sips from a can of nourishment drink. In his left hand, a half-smoked spliff burns away. He is all alone in this room full of people, family and friends. When he sees Staffe, his eyes brighten temporarily, then close down their hoods, as if he is struggling not to surrender to sleep. Jadis's way. Staffe had gone back to his flat in Queen's Terrace and cleaned up. He'd rustled up some coddled eggs and munched down an entire cantaloupe melon, washed that through with 2 cans of Red Bull, then dropped the bags off at forensics. 2 blocks away, in a £5 car wash, a youth had given Staffe's car the 3rd degree. The youth had tied a West Ham scarf around his face to guard against the smell, and quoted 20 quid for a quick valet. Danger money, he had called it. He kisses Jasmine on the cheek, and she says how nice he smells. She introduces Staffe around the room, and he shakes the hands of Jadis's family. His father is absent, which is a cause for relief. The last time Staffe saw him, Mr. Golding spat at him, the day Jadis was sentenced to 7 years. Partly because of Staffe's efforts, the boy, now a man, had served less than half. Jadis's grandmother grips Staffe tightly by the hand and thanks him. The grandfather turns his back. Jasmine puts some music on. Calypso, he thinks. An uncle and an aunt get up and dance, gliding across the floor, hips undulating to the beat. The grandmother serves some punch. Jadis, unmoved in his winged armchair, catches Staffe's attention, beckons him.
"Didn't think you'd come."
"I said I would," says Staffe. Jadis smiles, doped.
"Thought it'd be all crack pipe and crystal and pussy, right?"
"You have a good family, Jadis. You're lucky."
"Oh, I'm lucky, all right."
Jadis looks around the room, a serious expression establishing itself.
"Got my Millie to tend for now."
Suddenly, Jadis looks sad. Staffe doesn't know why this 21-year-old isn't more pleased to be free once more. "You are going to be all right."
"That job's not there. Jasmine's cousin with the pie shop is a prick. I can't work with him."
"When's your first session with probation?"
"If I can't get a job, the whole thing's fucked, man. I got no chance."
"Why did you lie?"
"Who's going to give me a job?"
"Plenty of people. You're an intelligent man and you're prepared to work." Jadis feigns a weak smile and raises the spliff to his mouth, takes a long drag.
"You know, I don't understand why you chose me."
"Chose?"
"Visiting me. You said you wanted to help me turn my life around. Your words."
"In my job, people like you and people like me, it's a battle. We win, we lock you up. You win, you do it again. I just wanted to try the middle way."
"You really don't think I'll do it again?"
Staffe looks across at Jasmine Cash, beautiful and happy and surrounded by family in the home she has made from the sty. Baby Millie on her hip. "I'll see what I can do."
"Maybe I could walk the fucking beat, hey?"
Staffe sneaks a look at his watch, but Jadis catches him. "There's somewhere I have to be, sorry."
"I guess there'll always be another me waiting to fill the empty bed, right? You go catch the poor motherfucker, Inspector. Don't let me stop you."
Staffe mulls what Jadis had said, and true enough, by the time he is caught in traffic, where Old Street meets City Road, his mind is turning towards the hospital, the bed of Kerry Degg. Will he get to talk to her, ever? Would she have known her captor? A uniformed officer guards the door to Kerry's room, and the doctor brings Pulford up to date. They can't prescribe any stronger doses of antibiotics, even though the infection is spreading. Kerry isn't strong enough to withstand an operation, but if she doesn't improve in 36 hours, they will have to employ the knife anyway. "Will she make it?" asks Pulford. "She's very poorly," says the doctor. "If you had to say one way, if you were a betting man." The doctor looks at Pulford as if he is unclean. "We may well have to gamble, Sergeant. But I'm not a betting man. These conversations are worthless." Pulford sits with Kerry, and is still there when Staffe arrives. He watches as his DI reads the spreadsheet analysis of all the underground Victorians. Of the contacted members, none of the cells — address, employment, dependent profiles, performance, criminal activity — tally with Kerry's. Staffe looks at Kerry Degg. She appears calm, almost serene. Her eyes are closed, her limbs laid straight. Still as a windless night. He tries to recall her bursting with life and theatrical allure on stage back in October in the Boss Clef. He wonders if she knows she has a new baby daughter. And will she ever sing her a lullaby, or see the baby's father ache with worry about her? He eventually says, "I found new evidence. Forensics have got it all, but I'm pretty sure the bastards kept Kerry down in the tunnel for weeks. And she had the baby down there too." A knock at the door, and the uniformed officer comes in, says to Staffe, "You're needed, sir, up at the station. It's DCI Pennington, said it was urgent. Apparently he's been after you for a while."
End of Disc 1. Disc 2.
On the way to see Pennington, Pulford says to Staffe, "How did you get on with your nurse the other night? You left early."
"You told her about Sylvie."
"Well, she was asking about you. It was a party I'd had a bit."
"I'd rather you keep out of my private affairs."
"Is that what it is?"
"Oh, shut up, Pulford."
Staffe knocks on Pennington's door, and the DCI beckons them in.
He's frowning. "Well, it didn't take long for this to go tits up," he sighs. "How, sir?" said Staffe. "The DNA results came through. It's Sean and Kerry Degg's baby, all right." "But that's good news, and it consolidates his motive." "You'd think, but I got this half an hour ago."
Pennington passes an A4 piece of paper.
Staffe reads it quickly, says, "Oh, God," then reads it again, slowly, before handing it to Pulford.
On the letterheading of a group called Breath of Life, which carries neither address nor telephone number, the letter briefly introduces Breath of Life as an independently funded community of Christians who enforce the sacrosanct rights of our unborn population. It explains that their sources had advised them that Kerry Degg had attended a consultation at City Royal Hospital and had requested a termination, which had subsequently been denied on the grounds of the unexpired term being too short. Acting on reliable information regarding Kerry Degg's intention to pursue her proposed termination through a private murdering house, Breath of Life felt they had no choice but to treat Mrs. Degg themselves, providing an assisted childbearing on a secluded site.
"Is this right?" says Pennington.
"About a consultation at City Royal?"
"I don't know, sir."
"Well, you should."
"We'll check."
"I already have, and it's confirmed. She went there at the beginning of her 25th week, the 6th of bastard January." Staffe takes the letter back from Pulford, squints at the signature. Pulford says, "I think it says Leslie Crawford, sir. I'll get onto it and search for the group too."
"Call themselves bloody Christians," says Staffe.
"We have evidence that she'd been held down there for weeks, sir. Forensics are checking it out, but we found food and drink debris down there, and faeces too. There was tissue or organs as well."
"Christ alive," says Pennington. "We have to foreground the positive in this case, the Josie Chancellor angle."
"What will the press make of Leslie Crawford and her mob?" says Pulford.
"There's plenty of people who'll see it as a life saved, sir."
"That's nothing to do with us," says Staffe.
"Exactly," says Pennington.
"Let's hope that mother and daughter both survive, and we can pin this on Crawford sharpish." Staffe rereads the letter, examines the wording closely, and fears the worst. 6. Staffe drives through Richmond Deer Park and picks up the river road at Kingston, passing Surbiton with its tree-lined streets of Victorian villas that run down to the Thames. He parks up on the green at Thames Ditton. The daffodils are out, and the schools must have broken up for Easter, because mothers sit in clusters, forming rings and watching each other's children play, cajoling excellence from their offspring. An old boy in a Panama makes measured progress, stick in hand. He checks his watch and veers to a bench, knowing the Angel will not be open for another half hour. 16 The Green, the home of Bridget Lamb, née Kilbride, sister of Kerry Degg, is just how Staffe remembers it. A double-fronted, stuccoed Georgian residence with a perfectly tended garden and a freshly painted racing green front door. He presses the bell. It rings brilliantly in the spring morning. A man of similar age to Staffe opens the door. He is dressed for retirement, though, with thick brogues and mustard cords, a Bengal shirt, and hair oiled with pomade. "Mr. Lamb?"
he says. The man nods, looks at him inquisitively. For a moment he appears to be taken aback. Beyond, the hallway's tiled, after William Morris. The house is shiny and silent. "Inspector? She's expecting you." Lamb shows Staffe into a room at the back of the house. The French windows are open, and a woman sits at a table on the patio, a fresh cafetiere yet to be plunged, and a crystal pillbox piled with Parma violets. Bridget Lamb wears sunglasses. She has fine blonde hair in a bob and ruby-painted lips. She looks 10 years older than her sister, maybe more. When she speaks, it is a child's voice. She holds out a hand, and Staffe takes it, mindful not to be too firm. Her hand is cold, the grip firm. She says, "It's terrible what's happened to Kerry. I would visit, but I don't want to upset her." Her breath is strong and floral from the violets. "You don't get on?" "It wouldn't take a policeman to discover that we are chalk and cheese." She plunges the coffee, and it takes all her might. Slowly, as if recalling the lines of a poem from prep, Bridget elucidates the ways in which Kerry had made different choices. She makes it sound deliberate, can't mask her disappointment. "I've seen her school reports," says Staffe. "Was there a point when she lost interest?" "She was a woman very young. I'm 2 years older, but Kerry was first to most things. I've had analysis." Staffe looks back into the house, then checks the garden out. "You don't have children?" "You're here to talk about Kerry, aren't you?" Her social workers say she didn't have the emotional strength to be a mother, but she appears to love the children. "She loved the fathers more." Bridget looks away from Staffe as she says it, ashamed, as if she had bitten into something unexpectedly foul. A device within the house pings. "You and your husband—" "I must go in now." As they pass through the house, a smell of something freshly baked drifts from the kitchen. Bridget fusses in the kitchen, struggling with the aga, using oven mitts. Crouched, and with her back to Staffe, Bridget says softly, "I find it upsetting to talk about Kerry." She waits for Staffe to come closer. "My husband said I should cooperate." She lifts the tray onto the top of the oven. It bears 2 small golden cottage loaves, and Staffe wants to rip into them right now while they're hot. "Your sister is very ill, and it is none of my business, but if anything happens, which is quite possible, I would hate to think you had missed an opportunity to see her a last time." Bridget gasps, swallowing her own breath, and puts her hand to her throat. She shakes her head and steps away, knocking into the open oven door and blinking, her eyes watery. "You should go," she says. "Please go." On balance, Staffe decides to comply. But as he gets to his car, Bridget's husband appears from nowhere, rag in hand. He'd been crouched behind his car, supposedly waxing it. "You don't remember, do you, Will? Malcolm Lamb." Staffe squints, feigning incredulity. "Malky?" He remembered him from the minute he clocked Bridget's married name, put it with the address. "I remember your parents. Always very decent to me. Such a terrible shame. Did they ever catch those people?" Staffe shakes his head, recalling that he hadn't always been decent to Malky Lamb. On close examination, he sees how little that shy boy, who now lives in his parents' house, seems to have changed. And as he drives away, he is transported to the day his own parents died. The aftershock from that Biscay bomb. Josie's eyes are dark and hollow. Her shoulders sag. She stares vaguely at the collected monitors and sacks of liquid that stand beside the confined cot that holds baby Grace. Tubes and wires feed life through airlocked holes into the incubator. Staffe draws up a chair and sits beside Josie. After a minute or so, she holds out her hand. He takes it, puts an arm around her shoulder, and draws her to him. She rests her head against his neck, and he feels her breathing slow down a little. Shortly after, her body jolts. In her dreams, she must have fallen. He stays with her until Sean Degg arrives. Then he whispers in her ear, "The father has come. You better leave him alone with the baby." The jolly nurse with the golden hair is with Sean. As Josie blinks from sleep, she says, "Can he be trusted?" Sean says, "You're the one who found her. I can't ever thank you enough. She is a gift from God. Truly a gift." "You should have done more," says Josie. "She doesn't know what she's saying," says Staffe. Sean says, "I can't believe she's mine. I can't believe she survived." Staffe watches the way Josie looks at Sean, unable in her stripped-bare state to see him with anything other than contempt. Sean kneels beside the cot, his hands clasped together, looking intently at his flesh and blood. There is a zealous strain of contrition in the way he rocks back and forth, saying over and over again, "My gift." Staffe asks the nurse if someone will be staying with Sean. "He is the father." "I'll send someone. Until then, please keep an eye on him. Every second." In reception, Staffe urges Josie to go home. She consents, but says she'll be in tomorrow to catch the bastards. "That witch, Leslie Crawford. I'll see her burn, if she's the one who left Grace." Pulford arrives, says, "I've got what you wanted, on Breath of Life." Staffe takes it. "Now, check up on Bridget Lamb. Bridget Kilbride, as was. She lived in Kingston after she left school. Then when she married, she moved to Thames Ditton. Look out for any mention of church groups she might be involved with." "This is Kerry Degg's sister?" "Exactly. Now, what's the latest on Kerry?" "No better, sir." "So, tell me about Leslie Crawford and Breath of Life." "She lives out in Southfields." His sergeant hands Staffe a wad of paper. "The internet's got some stuff on her, but the latest thing, before this, was a letter she wrote about the private members' bill being brought by a backbencher, a guy called Vernon Short. It's to reduce the threshold for terminating pregnancies to 20 weeks. "And she's in favour of this?" "Well, you'd think so. But it looks like she's got it in for this bloke Short. She calls him a collaborator." "I'd better go and see her." "Not a problem. When I spoke to her on the phone, it sounded as though she couldn't wait." Outside, the remnants of the warm day linger. The evening draws in, but people are staying outside, and the bars and pavement cafes are effervescent with office workers, drinking and chatting. It is a day to cling on to, and as they get into Staffe's car, he says, "Read me that letter of Leslie Crawford's that the Guardian published." Pulford taps away at his BlackBerry, begins to read. "It remains one of the most incomprehensible crimes of modern Britain that we expend so much time and energy preserving the rights of all manner of minority groups, that we are immobilised by political correctness and Bibles of legislation from Brussels, that we engage in wars in far-flung corners of the globe to protect foreigners against tyranny, and write off billions upon billions of pounds of debt from the so-called developing world, yet on our own doorstep murder is sanctioned every hour of every day. It is time to address the genocide of an unborn population, and the Right Honourable Vernon Short's proposed bill simply doesn't go far enough. In fact, it further legitimises these crimes. This is a question of murder and morality, not simple arithmetic." And she goes on, sir. She seems pretty militant. Not half. Sounds like a bloody Mitford sister. Should we expect blue stockings and a revolver in her handbag? In her Art Deco lounge, Leslie Crawford says, "You expected me to be a nutter, did you? Well, you may be right." She steps out of her court shoes and leans back into a macassar ebony chair that looks as if it might be a Paul kiss. She wafts an arm for Staffe and Pulford to sit. "How did you do it?" "Get into the tunnel, I mean," says Staffe, weighing up the room, trying not to concentrate on Leslie Crawford and her slow, confident mannerisms. "Whatever makes you think I did?" Leslie gives them a superior, withering look. "What about the letter you sent?" says Pulford. Staffe interjects, shooting a chastising, sharp glance at Pulford. "Of course, you didn't. The you was plural. Your hands are for letter writing, not dirtying on the common business of kidnap and murder." "The child would have died," she says. "The organisation had no choice." "How long did you have her down there in the tunnel?" "How long does a child have to live in this world before you are stopped from killing it?" "I'm not here to talk politics, Miss Crawford." "I'm a miss. And I'm talking about murder, not politics. Murder is police work, isn't it, Inspector?" She leans forward, elbows on her knees, chin raised and resting on a single extended index finger. "Whoever delivered the baby had a reasonable knowledge, and they knew how to clean up a crime scene." "This was an act of kindness, not crime." "So I'll need a list of all your members." "There is no such thing." "Your church will be a good place to start. And a thorough search here, of course." "Oh, you can't do that." Crawford looks directly at Staffe and smirks. He slowly pulls an envelope from the inside pocket of his jacket. "This is a warrant to search your premises. You could give me the list of your members to save time, and to avoid any mess." Leslie Crawford stands, takes a mobile phone off the mantel and says into it, "You can come through, Jasper." Staffe watches her intently as she sits back down, untroubled. Together they look at the door as it opens. A tall, elegant man enters, wearing a finely tailored suit with a high-collared, open-neck shirt. He is about as smooth as the legal profession gets. "Inspector, this is—" "Yes, I know, Jasper Rennick. Come on, Sergeant, we're going," says Staffe. "Don't you want to search my home?" Staffe approaches Crawford. In heels she would be almost as tall as him. He hisses, "I will nail you for this. The law is a sword, not a shield." "What murderous metaphors you choose, Mr. Wagstaff. I'll see you in court, if you wish to waste police time." On the way out, Staffe notices how many books Leslie Crawford has, in cases lining the hallway, all the way to the kitchen at the back of the house, and he wonders what madnesses people might become capable of when they spend their lives drowning in words. As they drive away, he says, "She wants front pages out of this. Well, she'll get nothing from us." Jasper Rennick, he's quite famous, isn't he? "He's a prick who'd do anything to get on television. But he's good. We won't give him the chance. He wants us to go after Breath of Life, so we won't." Pulford says, "Because it's the individual we need to get." "Exactly. Breath of Life just collates the publicity. We can't put an organisation, a letterheading in the dock. It's not even a charity." Staffe's telephone rings. The screen says Josie. He answers, and immediately Staffe can tell she is upset. "What's happened?" "Kerry Degg has been taken into theatre. 20 minutes ago." Staffe knows that Leslie Crawford wouldn't bat an eye. would quite possibly draw her thin lips into a smile. Kerry's face is all he can see of her as the surgeon works intently. From the look on the nurses' faces, Staffe concludes it is a forlorn matter. A man in a suit, masked and gloved, sidles to Staffe, says, "The prospects are poor." Staffe looks at Kerry, focuses on her eyes, hoping they will flicker, might impart some clue. He will find the killer anyway. Won't he? It seems to him that something moves, and her lips, they seem to have parted. He thinks it is the slightest semblance of a smile. A high-pitched electronic whine comes from beside the anaesthetist. He moves into action, putting an oxygen feed over Kerry's face, and Staffe closes his eyes. The man in the suit says something that Staffe doesn't hear. He feels something leave the room. Pictures Laurie dos Passos, beguiling her audience with movement and voice, flesh and life. 7. The press are having a field day with the Kerry Degg story. Baby Grace is in a critical but stable condition. Sean, by her bedside, has been staring transfixed at his daughter ever since the nurses told him that his wife had passed away. He shed not a single tear, which made Staffe think that if Sean did crack, he would break altogether. The Red Tops have somehow acquired a picture of Sean by Grace's bed, but the editors haven't dared to come down one way or the other on the subject of Leslie Crawford, devil or do-gooder. It doesn't help her cause that, despite the fact that she is the signatory for Breath of Life, she looks so calm and assured. Nor that she is a childless spinster. Nor that Jasper Rennick, smoothest of all the slippery lawyers in London town, has kept the law from her door. The News dared to say in its editorial that no matter what you think of Vernon Short's upcoming private members' bill, the saving of one life, if you accept that is what it was at the time of Kerry Degg's abduction, can never justify the taking of another. Conversely, though expressed with the lightest of touches, the Post said that an innocent was saved and that nobody could ever call Kerry Degg innocent. They carry a picture of her 2 children with their foster parents, John and Sheila Archibald. The children smile into camera with gap teeth. The foster parents look glum. The broadsheets focused on the story's Gothic unusualness. Any political analysis was even-handed. Certainly, Vernon Short was transformed from a backbench nobody to a daring crusader. Some church leaders hailed him as a potential future Home Secretary, or even Prime Minister. Pulford shakes the newspaper angrily. Breath of Life and Vernon Short are both getting exactly what they want. "I'm going to see Nick Absalom," says Staffe. "At the News? I thought you loathed him." "And then I'm going to pay Vernon Short a visit." Vernon Short is perfectly happy to tell Staffe about his upcoming private members' bill. He repeats his statement of regret to Staffe, as if his every word will be committed to history. He says that everything that is incumbent upon us as a responsible nation should be achieved through discourse and legislation, not direct action. What happened to Kerry Degg was reprehensible. However, let Baby Grace be a shining testament to the value we should assign to life. The virtue of his bill is illuminated by this sorry tale. "Save the speech, Mr. Short. It's wasted on me," says Staffe. "I'm not here to cast a vote. What do you know of Leslie Crawford?" Vernon's smile shallows in the finest degree. "We both believe in the rights of our unborn population. Our methods are different, of course." "In what respect?" "Well, I wouldn't ever—" Vernon stops himself and presses the intercom on his telephone, asks his secretary to make some coffee and bring through biscuits. "You wouldn't ever—" I really don't know anything about Leslie. You clearly think she's capable of murdering somebody to further her ambitions. I said no such thing. You should be careful what conclusions you draw, Inspector. Leslie's press statement and Kerrydegg's baby daughter have lengthened your day in the sun. I don't care for your tone. The pollsters reckon so. A few days ago, nobody had even heard about your bill. It was doomed. A backbench flirtation. It is good law. The argument will speak for itself. The door opens, and Short's secretary comes in with the tray. Short stands and hitches his trousers, motions with the slightest dip of his head for the secretary to take the coffee and biscuits back where they came from, which she does. I have another appointment. No point in good laws if they're not enforced, Mr. Short. Now, tell me what the Home Secretary makes of your bill. It is common knowledge that she is publicly against it. We are a broad church, and Cathy is pretty much on the centre-left. Political suicide for you, then, I'd say. There comes a time when you have to stand up for what is right. The government doesn't want this debate, does it? Especially Cathy Killick. The government embraces debate, especially the Home Secretary. You can amend your bill. You can change it any time in the next week. Short regards Staffe with renewed suspicion. You've done your homework, but I do not intend to. You do not intend to. You could have said, I will not, but you didn't. I do not intend to. You're a career backbencher, eh, Vernon? Not even the sniff of a junior ministry, and you're what, in your 50s? These young guns with their spin-doctoring ways tearing past you. It would crown your career, wouldn't it? If you were to be offered something. Stepping into the old man's shoes at last. You have quite an imagination. You should exercise some restraint, Inspector. When did you take up the cause of the unborn population, as you call it? Staffe takes out a single sheet of A4. From it, he begins to read a list of bills that Vernon Short has voted for and against, provided courtesy of Nick Absalom of the News. When he is done, Staffe says, hardly a coherent pattern of voting behaviour, not the actions of a moral crusader. I judge each case on its merits. You have to take voting into its wider context. You are being a little naive. You have always gone where the whip blew you. Until now. Staffe places the sheet of A4 on Vernon Short's desk. And you, Mr. Short, are the naive one. If you think I won't find out exactly what you do from now on, and what you've been up to, all the way back to the 6th of January. The 6th? Ask Leslie Crawford. Ask Sean Degg. Ask the baby when she grows up and can answer you. Because I'll have to answer to her when she asks who murdered her mother. Josie carries the drinks into the room where Sean Degg sits beside his daughter's incubated cot. A dark-haired nurse had sat with him, but leaves as soon as Josie returns. She hands Sean his black tea and sips from her own machine-made mocha. You were going to tell me how you and Kerry met. She was much younger, right? Sean sips his black tea, pops a pill into his mouth. Soon he looks relaxed and he talks, low, almost to himself. Kerry was 16 when we met. I was booking gigs. I had a couple of clients, but I never made much money. Too soft, I suppose. You met her at a gig? Sean stands and looks down on his baby. Her eyes closed and her skin still pale. He mumbles, she was adopted. Never even knew her dad. And when Kerry was 6 or 7, her new father was killed in a crash.
I tried to get Kerry to see someone about it, but she wouldn't. What about her sister, Bridget? Says Josie. Maybe you should go and see her. It might help both of you. Kerry wouldn't want that. Josie knew the answer to her next question, asked it anyway. Have you seen Kerry since she passed away? She wouldn't want that. And what about you? The first time she performed for me was an open mic up at the Angel. She could make herself anything on that stage. I saw it from the first look, the first sound of her. I saw it. He's transfixed by the motionless baby. He looks at Josie, then quickly away, as if afraid of her response. Do you believe them when they say Grace's chances are good? Josie reaches out with her hand, and Sean takes it. He grips Josie hard. Together they sip from their drinks. Staffe settles into his nook in the Hand and Shears, drinks lustily from his pint of spiced-up tomato juice. He eyes up the Adnams. April catches him at it from behind the bar and throws a tea towel over her shoulder. Laughs. I don't know why you deny yourself. Not when Dick's beer is so good. Some of us have work to do, he says. Oh dear. Someone's in for it then. Hopefully, he thinks, breaking open the early evening edition of the news. He scans the front page and sees no outcome from his earlier conversation with Nick Absalom. Flicking through, he spots it on page 7, a 2-column piece. He has another draft of the Virgin Mary and takes in a cube of ice, sucks on it as he reads. New developments in the Baby Grace case suggest that police are looking beyond the claims that members of the Breath of Life group are responsible for the kidnapping of Grace's mother, Kerry Degg. No official statement has been made by City Police, but we have cause to believe that the claim by Leslie Crawford, a member of Breath of Life, that Kerry was kidnapped by their members is simply a smokescreen. The upcoming Private Members Bill, presented by backbencher Vernon Short, has gained a dramatic surge in support following the saving of baby Grace. Our reporters attempted to seek clarification that Vernon Short condemned the actions of Breath of Life, but the MP was unavailable for comment. After 4 days, and even in the light of the death of Kerry Degg, no arrests have been made in relation to what the organisation calls assisted childbearing. Carol Ames, spokesperson for Choice, an organisation fiercely opposed to Short's bill, reiterated that Leslie Crawford should be arrested. Ames condemned as irresponsible any possibility that City Police were treating Breath of Life claims lightly. The condition of baby Grace remains critical but stable, and her plight has served as a rallying call for religious groups throughout the country who represent the interests of the unborn population. Staffe rereads the piece and folds the paper back down. Leslie Crawford will have to make the next move if she wants the world to believe that Breath of Life were behind the Kerry Degg murder. He finishes his tomato juice to within 2 thick fingers of the bottom of the glass and catches the attention of April, mimes the pulling of a pint. She laughs out loud and wags a finger at him, then pulls his Adnams. He texts Pulford to get back down to Southfields to monitor the comings and goings of everybody who visits Leslie Crawford. Under no circumstances is he to be seen, though. It is imperative that she believes that police are looking elsewhere for Kerry Degg's killer. The narrow doors to the snug swing open, and Josie comes in, takes his pint from April, and sits alongside Staffe. "You talk to Sean," he says. Josie picks up the glass of tomato juice, finishes it and says, He let something slip. Said Kerry was adopted. Her new dad died when she was young, and he told me how they met. I don't see that Sean could have taken Kerry down into that tunnel.
Staffe puts down his pint, untouched, says, "Adopted? Bridget didn't say anything about that." 8. In his office, Staffe reads Kerry's school reports again, and her small volumes of poetry, handwritten in an immaculate, leaning hand, within slim, hardback volumes tied with mauve ribbons. She had been a B student who did not apply herself in the least, and was both easily led and a distraction to others. None of her teachers thought anything would come of her, save a Mr. Trohe, who took Kerry for English, and in the last 2 years of her education urged her to stay on for the sixth form, and to push herself to get into university. He said Kerry had a unique voice in her writing, and a natural grasp of the power of words. Staffe read one poem again, entitled Blood on the Thorn, about loving an older boy, possibly a man. The closer she got, the more it hurt, until finally the love became unbearable. It scarred. The symbolism of a girl changing into a woman too fast, and still trapped in the body of a girl, is obvious. Staffe wonders who the thorn might be. Sean? Trohe himself? Possibly. He makes a note to look up the teacher, but then drifts back to that night, maybe 7 years after she wrote that poem, when she stood on stage and captivated a decadent audience with her bawdy songs and sultry voice, her tight bodice and bared secrets. And she would be discovered too by Philip Ramone, who would offer Kerry her chance in life. He makes a tick under Document Removed, and signs for it, slips the volume into his pocket, and returns the rest of the documents to the box, takes it down to Jombo. In the city, it is another mild day after the long, hard winter. He calls Pulford to see whether there have been any comings and goings at Leslie Crawford's house. His sergeant, displeased and tired and failing to see the point of his vigil, says nobody had come or gone, and asks if somebody else could take a turn. Staffe tells him no, hangs up, and turns to Josie. "Fancy a ride down to see Kerry's sister in Thames Ditton? I'll treat you to lunch by the river."
You used to live down there.
He can't remember when he might have told her that. Bridget Lamb gives her husband a chastising side-swipe of a look as he stands in the drawing-room doorway, looking at Josie a second too long. He asks if they want coffee or something a little stronger.
"There's no need for you to be involved in this," says Bridget. "There's that shopping to do."
Staffe says, "I think it would be good for Malcolm to sit in." Malcolm nods sheepishly and sits down beside Bridget. "Sean tells me that you and Kerry were adopted."
"How is that relevant?"
says Bridget. "Perhaps it's not. But what interests me is why you didn't tell me."
"Because it has no relevance."
I try my damnedest to understand her. You know that.
"So, now you know."
"And we know she'd been offered a residency at the Rendezvous in town. Are you au fait with the place?" Bridget nods, crinkles her nose. "How would that make you feel?"
"I don't see how what I might feel has anything to do with what happened to Kerry. And it's no business of yours."
"I need to understand you too, Bridget." You make her sound like a suspect, for God's sake," says Malcolm. Bridget shakes her head disdainfully at Malcolm. "I've been reading Kerry's poems from school. There was a teacher, a Mr. Trohe." Bridget looks at Malcolm again, and her hands clasp tight.
"When was the last time you saw Kerry?" says Josie.
Bridget regards Josie with suspicion.
"Not in a long time. She is in my prayers, of course."
"Did you go to the hospital?"
"It wouldn't have helped."
She looks at Malcolm, who nods.
"But Sean did come to see me when she left him in January." He thought she would be here. He said he was sure the baby was his this time, and he said she was going to get rid of it.
You would have been dead against her, not having the baby, says Josie.
Wouldn't anybody who knew right from wrong? It was for her career. You can't kill just to get a step ahead.
Especially as you aren't in the position to have a family, says Staffe. That must make Kerry's decision hard to handle. Malcolm glares at Staffe, tries to restrain himself but can't. It seems that a suppressed force has been released. He takes a step towards Staffe. What gives you the right to pry so? You are a guest in my house, my parents' house. They knew your parents, and you might have deemed yourself superior to me, but we are adults now. Do you have no common decency? My wife has lost her sister, and you come snooping like this. Not an ounce of decency. Not an ounce! Malcolm is shaking. His chin is weak, trembling. Staffe stands, looks slightly down on Malcolm. He recalls him as a frail boy, but dismisses that. There'll be no stone unturned here, and let's all pray that if we ask enough questions and look under enough stones, we might unearth some decency. For the sake of that baby. If she lives. He scribbles in his notebook for a minute, allowing the silence to stretch. He has a notion that Malcolm had a disease, a condition, at least. I hope your wife is what she seems, Malcolm. I really do. He looks at Bridget. You see, I know. Sean told me. Bridget looks quickly away and begins to shake. Malcolm puts his hand on her shoulder, and she shrugs him away, says, He told you what? Staffe takes a step towards Malcolm, puts a hand on his shoulder and says, looking at his watch, Perhaps that drink might be in order. DC Chancellor and I will have tea. Staffe waits for Malcolm to go, then sits beside Bridget. He says softly, You have to tell your side of it. Bridget looks up, fierce determination in her eyes, her jaw set firm. In a clear, unwavering voice she says, I don't have to do anything. Their lives don't touch me. I'm not like them. Whatever he has said, take it with you. You'll get nothing from me. Then we'll do it the hard way. Shame for Malcolm. He's a good man, said Bridget. We'll see. On their way out, Staffe and Josie meet Malcolm coming out of the kitchen carrying a tray. Nothing is said, and each man looks as if he doesn't have anything to be ashamed of. As they get in the car, Josie says, What did Sean Degg tell you, sir? Oh, nothing. But Bridget did. What did she tell you? That she and Sean have a secret. And she can't have children. He drives them to the Alma, as he had promised, for a ploughman's on the river, looking across to Hampton Court. Henry, and all those wives, and unborn heirs. Sean has pulled his chair right up to the cot where Grace is lying, enclosed in a plastic dome against the germs of the world. You need to tell me all about Bridget, Sean, says Staffe. What would I know about Bridget? Sean Degg sighs, turns towards the baby's monitors. I've been thinking about why you would lie like that. Like what? Telling my constable you've not seen Bridget in years. Did I? But you called round to see her when Kerry disappeared. I was only there 10 minutes. It's not looking good for you, Sean. You need to stop lying to us. All I can say is I'd never harm Kerry. Why can't you believe that? There's something else you need to tell me. Sean stands up. He goes to the cot and puts his fingers to the glass bubble. He stoops, says to Grace, I won't be long, my darling. He turns to face Staffe and blows out his cheeks and smiles.
Let's get some air. How is Bridget?
You wouldn't think she had lost a sister. I know they didn't get on, but Kerry was her sister. Sean stops in the corridor and a trolley is pushed by. He crouches, messing with his bootlaces. He curses. When he stands, he says,
Siblings can be like that. Bridget wasn't the baby, not once Kerry came along. You got any fags?
Gave them up.
I used to roll them for Kerry. I miss that.
Outside they pass a newsagent, and Sean says,
I'm going to get some bacca.
Inside, Sean checks what he has in his pocket and keeps a fiver and loose change back. He offers the newsagent 60 quid. Whispers,
You have a back way, don't you? It goes on to the estate.
None of your business. Sean looks back, sees the inspector looking up and down the street.
60 quid for you. Let me out the back. That bloke out there, he's looking for me. I was with his wife, see? Look at the size of him. He'll kill me.
Maybe you deserve it.
I didn't know she was married. She's a tart, honest.
Sean proffers the money, and the newsagent shakes his head.
Somebody once fucked my missus. He smiles. I beat the shit out of them both. In that case,
Sean reaches carefully into his pocket.
I'll keep my money. Treat her to dinner, maybe.
What? Sean pulls out the scalpel he had lifted from the trolley in the hospital corridor. He makes the smallest gesture towards the newsagent, who flinches.
Got it from hospital. It's used. I'm a male nurse, and this has plenty of germs. It's not the cut that'll do for you. It's the disease.
The newsagent nods, wide-eyed, sidles from behind the counter and goes into a passageway, unlocks the back door. Sean pushes the newsagent outside and follows him.
Lock it,
he says, and the newsagent does.
Now, lie on your stomach and count to 1,000.
Sean bends down, lifts the keys from the newsagent's hand and jangles the bunch.
I can slip in the back any time I want, so don't you say a fucking thing.
Sean puts his boot on the newsagent's wrist and nicks the fleshy pad at the base of his thumb with the scalpel. He presses with his boot and watches the blood come. 9. Staffe can't believe that Sean Degg has slipped his net, and he can't quite fathom why he would do that when he wasn't even under arrest. He has replayed the conversation they were having about Bridget, but it only leads him back to his own bluff. There is no point going back to Bridget until he knows more about Sean, until he has spoken to Sean. In the meantime, he has come to see Kerry's children. The foster parents, John and Sheila Archibald, are more than enough to scare the bejesus out of any child, standing in the porch of their interwar semi on the outskirts sprawl that is the Finchley Road. All they need is a pitchfork and a pig out back to be straight from Hopper's Midwest. "You don't look like a policeman," says Mr. Archibald, squinting at Staffe's warrant card, his beige-coloured tongue poking out between his fat, wet, oxblood lips.
"The sooner they're in, the sooner they're gone," says Sheila. "And you won't be dragging our name in no mud. Those poor children, they can't choose their parents. Nobody can."
"We can choose the children," says John Archibald, a proud grin spreading,
"but not their parents."
He stands aside, waves Staffe and Josie into his home as if it were the primest waterfront. Staffe knows the Archibald situation. According to Carly Kellerman of Social Services, they are serial fosterers. Their track record is untarnished, and they take all ages. They are in it for the money, according to Carly, and apparently it's not necessarily a bad thing for their itinerant and ever-changing subjects. They are pros.
"This is Miles," says Sheila Archibald, passing the palm of her hand across his swayed head.
Miles looks up, glum. He wears short trousers and a polo shirt. His cheeks shine, and his eyes don't. Staffe thinks he looks like an evacuee.
"Hello, sir,"
says Miles, avoiding Staffe's eye, not an ounce of sincerity. Miles's little sister, Maya, clutches onto Mrs. Archibald's perma-creased slacks. Sheila swirls the child's ponytail in her fingers absently. But she catches Staffe's eye and says, "We brush it every night, don't we, Maya?" Josie sits on her haunches, eye level with the children.
"It's lovely here, isn't it? Aren't you lucky?"
Miles shrugs, and Maya scuttles round the back of her temporary mum, buries her face between Sheila's knees. Staffe takes a pound coin from his pocket and crouches alongside Josie, winking at Miles. He extends one arm, places the pound coin on his downturned hand, and with the other flicks it up his shirt cuff. It has disappeared. "Where's it gone?" he asks Miles. Miles shakes his head, shows a gummy smile. "Maya, do you know where it is?" Maya peers out from behind Sheila's legs. Staffe reaches across, letting the coin slip into the palm of his hand, putting it behind Maya's ear, and withdrawing his hand, holding the coin between his thumb and finger. "In Maya's ear all the time."
"Again!" shouts Miles. "Again!" shouts Maya.
Staffe repeats the trick, pulling the pound from down Miles's nose, then out of Josie's mouth, and finally from behind the ear of an unimpressed Sheila Archibald. "Now, you show Josie your toys, while I have a word with Mum and Dad."
"They call us Sheila and John, and it doesn't do to get them excited," says Sheila.
Staffe watches the children go with Josie and says, "Does Mum come round ever?" John Archibald shakes his head. "Good thing, too." "But the children must ask about her, if they know you're not their parents." "This isn't Little House on the Prairie. We can't get attached." "You mean the children can't?"
"She came round once," says Sheila.
"Just the once," says John, a hint of disapproval in the look he shoots at his wife. "She was in a state. Drunk. Worse. She ended up crying, and the children heard. We didn't let them see her, of course." "Would you say she loved them?"
"I don't know what you mean by that," says Sheila. "She had another one on the way, that's all I know. Women like her, they should be—"
"Sheila." John Archibald goes to his wife, puts an arm around her. "We have been told she is dead. The children don't know. I guess they'll be up for adoption now." "What about the father?" asks Staffe. "You ever see him?" They shake their heads in unison. "Or hear about him?" "Far as we know, there isn't a father. That's right, isn't it, Sheila?" says John Archibald. "I was talking about Sean Degg, Kerry's husband." "Ah. Have you seen him recently?" "I'm not sure we ever have." The Archibalds are clearly uneasy on the subject of the children's father, and Staffe can't clearly recall if Sean ever mentioned visiting the Archibalds. Surely he must have, and if he did, why would they deny it? "What about the real father?" Sean wasn't the real father.
"We know,"
says Sheila. "We don't know," says John, his lard-coloured face beginning to blotch. "Not exactly." "Did Sean tell you he isn't the father?"
"No,"
says Sheila. "He's not been here, that's why. We don't know anything about a father." "I'll need to ask the neighbours," Show Sean's photograph.
"We're respectable people," says Sheila.
Staffe's phone rings and he sees it is Jumbo. He calls up to Josie, who comes to the top of the stairs, carrying Maya and holding Miles's hand. Staffe says goodbye to the Archibalds, waves to the motherless children. Outside, he calls Jumbo back. John says, "We've had the analysis back on the phone call we got, reporting the baby in the car park. It's inconclusive. They can't even tell the gender of the caller. It was heavily disguised and might have been warped on a tape machine or even a mobile phone. Apparently they can do that these days." "Was it recorded or live?" "Probably recorded." Staffe hangs up, thinking that a recorded message reinforces the level of premeditation, the professionalism of the crime. On the drive back to the city, he thinks about what the Archibalds had said and how. He says to Josie, "They know the bastard father. I know they do. Why wouldn't they tell us?" Staffe catches up on his texts as he has a cup of tea with Jumbo in Leadengate's reception. One is from Jasmine Cash about Jadis, saying he's got a formal warning from probation for a failed employer's report. She says he has a week to find a job, otherwise his parole will be in breach. Staffe curses, thinks of the home Jasmine Cash has made for Millie and her dad. Good intentions amount to jack shit if you haven't got a job and a house and a family. You need all three to get straight, and stay that way. He feels an idiot for thinking he might be able to help. Jumbo takes a call of his own, nods across to Staffe with an upward jolt of the head. "Pennington," whispers Staffe. Jumbo nods, making a theatrical, glum face. Pennington isn't wearing a jacket. A piece of A4 in front of him has a list of names and numbers on it in his handwriting. On the face of it, it would appear that this DCI has spent at least some of the day tending to police work. "You can forget Sean Dog for a while, Staffe. Jesus Christ, how could you let him get away like that?" "I'm more interested in why he'd want to get away. But I'll catch up with him soon." "Not any time soon, you won't." "Has something happened?" "Bet your ass it has. Christ, this is getting nasty." "Well, what's happened?" "Just had a call from a D.I. Flint of South Liverpool CID. There's another pregnant woman missing. You're going up north, my man." "My case is here. I need to talk to Philip Ramone and to all Kerry's friends." 24 weeks pregnant, they reckon. It made the evening edition of their local rag." "You think it's related? How could it be?" "Half an hour ago we got another letter from Breath of Life. They knew all about the woman. She's called Zoe Bright." "And what about the husband?" "Forget it, Staffe. He loves her to bits, apparently." "Sounds familiar." "She nearly died having their first baby. It didn't survive." "He loves her as much as Sean loved Kerry Degg." "You make sure your team stays all over Leslie Crawford while you're up there." "There's a couple of things I have to do first," says Staffe, thinking of Philip Ramone. "There's a train from Euston in an hour. They'll be waiting for you at the other end." "There's a couple of things." Pennington leans forward and in his softest voice says, "Please, Will, just this once, be a good lad." Part 2. 10. In no time, and with a rack full of reservations, Staffe is transported to Liverpool. The railway tracks have magicked him with their tittle and tattle, and along the way he spoke to Pulford about staying on Leslie Crawford's case. Then he had called Josie, to tell her to follow up on Kerry's list of friends. Now the daylight is almost gone, and the train jolts, slows. People press their faces to the windows. As the carriages draw towards Lime Street Station, the tracks breathe in, and the train is sucked along a narrow chasm in the sandstone bedrock. Anyone who has travelled into this Celtic city will know that its gates open like rock thighs, as if it were delivering you into a new world. And then it is dark. In the vaulted, glass-roofed station, he steps down, valise in hand, and looks for a uniformed welcome. There is none. A tall, beautiful woman approaches him. She has layered red hair, cut to her shoulders. She is, in fact, very tall. "Inspector Wagstaff," she says. "How would you know?" "You have to be able to spot your friends as well as your foes." "Your police." She offers her hand. "How else would I know you were coming?" He takes her hand, finds a firm grip. She looks him in the eyes, hers are the palest green. "I'm Flint," she says. "Christ!" "Charming." He expects her to smile, but gets the reverse, and she spins on her heel, shows him her back, and walks off at a fine clip. Anthony Bright's house was a model for modern living when Lord Salisbury gave the land up for artisans and clerks in the preamble to the First World War. Now, on a tree-lined street of immaculately coiffured gardens and ringing birdsong, Staffe walks up a gingerbread path and has the front door opened for him by a bright-eyed constable who looks about 12. In his back room, sitting in a modern Swedish chair, Anthony stares into his garden. Staffe has read all the case notes in the interview transcripts. He wants to like Anthony, but all he gets is a scowl. Nonetheless, he introduces himself, pulls up a dining chair. "She'll be back. There'll be some explanation, but if you lot are here, she'll never call. She'd hate the fuss. I should never have called." "It's a serious matter, Anthony. I'm from London, and we've had an abduction similar to this down there. We need to know everything about Zoe. Everyone she saw, ever since she was pregnant this second time." Anthony stares at the trees at the bottom of his garden. Through the windows you can't see any other property. "Did she bring anybody new to the house in these last few weeks?" He shakes his head. "Anyone new in her phone or her address book?" He says as much to Alicia Flint as to Anthony. "I would never pry," says Anthony. "We're having her phone analysed," says Flint. "She didn't take her phone." Staffe takes the address book from Alicia Flint and scans quickly, looking for new names, in bold ink or interposed between old names. Zoe Bright is clearly very orderly, and all the names are alphabetical. In 4 cases, names have been squeezed in between lines. "Is this a new book?" "She spent all night copying everything across." "Where's the old one?" Anthony walks, round-shouldered, to a small pine sideboard and hands Staffe a dog-eared notebook. In turn he gives it to the constable, along with the new book. "We need a list of all names that are in the new book, but not the old one." Alicia Flint hands Staffe a typed list of 3 names. "These are they," she says, smiling. "You said in your interview that Zoe likes to read," he says, looking around for bookshelves. "Where are her books?" "She takes them to a charity shop when she's finished them. She only keeps ones that are on the go. They're upstairs." On the landing is a small bookcase. Photo albums and an atlas below, 6 paperbacks above. In the front of each book is a stamp which says, "The Curious Cat." On it, the outline of a cat in a fireside chair, legs crossed, reading. He checks in the bedroom, and even in the loo. "What was the last book she bought?" he says, coming back into the sitting room. "Beloved." "Toni Morrison," says Flint. Her eyes flit, as if she thinks she might have missed a trick. "It's not here." "We'll leave you in peace, Anthony," says Staffe. Anthony nods, and on the way out Staffe thinks how peculiar that a missing woman would take a novel with her, but not her mobile phone. Pulford watches Leslie Crawford leave her Southfields home. She looks furtively up and down the street of mid-sized late Victorian terraces with modest bays and front gardens the size of picnic blankets. Staffe had warned him not to take any risks, just to monitor who came and went. But he has been here off and on for the best part of 2 days, and the boredom has got to him. He calls Staffe and curses as the screen of his phone tells him the call has been ignored. He gets out of the car and locks it up, loiters out of Crawford's eye line behind a tree, waiting for her to reach the corner, and then he catches up, going up onto Replingham Road towards the Tube. Pulford rummages in his pockets, pulls out his travel warrant, and follows her across Wimbledon Park Road and into the station, which is like something from Betjeman's England, red brick and with tall mock Jacobean chimney stacks. He picks up the evening edition of the news and gets into the same carriage, sits on the same side as her so he can monitor her reflection in the window from above his paper. He looks at her as she stares right ahead. She has an exotic face, a hook to her nose and dark eyes. He knows from the case bio notes that she was educated at Queen Elizabeth Grammar School, Blackburn, then studied Greats at Cambridge. She did some lecturing, but abandoned her DPhil and worked in Papua New Guinea with the VSO before doing a PGCE. From what I can gather, she hasn't had a full-time job in 5 years. At Embankment, she stands up and moves smoothly to the doors. She is the first to step down. The train is not crowded, and he waits as long as he dare, feels a tingle around his heart and a slow fold in his belly as he follows her onto the platform. She carries a Hessian Eco Waitrose bag. Did she have it before? He thinks not. He's sure of it. He lets the gap between them extend. The carriage doors close, and the train jolts. As it moves out of the station, Pulford tries to clock anyone who is in her locale. A middle-aged man and a small group of foreign kids. He tries to picture her coming out of her Southfields house again. Did she have a bag? When he turns around, she's gone. "Shit!" he says, too loud, and checks to see if anyone has heard him, but he is alone. He quickly calculates what connection she might make, and realises there is only the Bakerloo or the Northern Line. He walks as briskly as he thinks you can without looking like a nutter, or a copper. He chooses the Bakerloo, because he hates the Northern Line, and as he approaches the platforms with steps down, dividing, he opts for North because there are more options. A train-gathered gust builds, and the rattle of the train gets louder. He bowls onto the platform, which is mainly full of 20-something folk. Again he tries not to move quickly or look concerned, and waits, not seeing Leslie Crawford anywhere. There is a final push. He steps on and the doors close behind him. He works a pocket of space. There is little room, and although he is tall, in the 2 minutes it takes to reach Piccadilly Circus, he can't spot her, despite his surreptitious looks and adjustments of stance. The doors open, and he takes the opportunity to step out, to allow people off. Seeing nothing, Pulford steps back into the thinned carriage, and the doors close behind him. The train jolts and stutters out of the station. As it goes, he scans the platform for signs of Leslie Crawford. There she is, with a straight back and a high head, turning into the tunnels that will take her above ground, or, more probably, further along on her journey. Pulford curses, and tries to calculate where Leslie Crawford is most likely to be going. Before he knows it, the train is slowing again as they enter Oxford Circus. He could chase to the opposite platform and get the next train back, but he knows there is no point. So he sits on a seat and lets the long ribbon of travellers wend past him into their night. He looks at their shoes and their faces and wonders where they might be headed. He looks at their clothes and the bags they carry, decides to get back to Southfields to at least glean how long Leslie Crawford stays out for. Then he sees it. A Hessian Eco Waitrose bag. There must be thousands of them, but he can't recall ever having seen one before tonight. When she left, was Leslie Crawford carrying hers? He doesn't think so, but he's already up, following the man with the bag. He is young and lean. He walks quickly and climbs the moving escalator. The neon mayhem of Oxford Circus meets them. The lean man barely wavers as he strides out through the hordes of late shoppers. Pulford struggles to keep up, but then the man slows, goes into the Argyle. Pulford follows him in, carries straight on through, clocking in a panelled and paned snug on the right, who the lean man is here to see. This is a pub for tourists, but there is an upstairs bar, which is where the man and his companion go, sipping from their pints as they climb out of sight, achieving a further degree of privacy. 10 minutes later, when the Right Honourable Vernon Short comes down and leaves the Argyle, he is alone, save for his Hessian Eco Waitrose bag. Staffe sees he has a missed call from Jasmine Cash. He trouses the handset and gives his undivided attention to the conversation between Alicia Flint and the doctor with whom Zoe Bright was registered at the Waverley Park Medical Centre for Women. Dr. Fahey looks at her watch repeatedly and punctuates her speech by blowing out her cheeks. She is homely, with freckles and bright blue eyes. "I'd love to be able to tell you exactly what we talked about. But we're not at that stage. All I can do is confirm that Zoe had an appointment that day and she attended." This woman is undoubtedly in a situation which compromises her well-being, says Alicia Flint for the umpteenth time. Then get your court order. It's coming. Staffe says, "What proportion of your consultations are related to terminations? This is a generic question." "A significant percentage." 100%? "Not quite." "Anthony didn't accompany her?" "Like I said—" "I'm telling you, he didn't attend. She was 24 weeks, and you saw her about a termination. Fair to say you set her up with the date for the deed just an hour or so before she went missing." "That's what you're saying," says Dr. Fahey, blowing out her cheeks for the longest time, staring at her watch. "In fact, it would have been only our second consultation, and I shouldn't even be telling you that. You do a difficult job, and I'm sure there's good achieved here in some ways. I don't give a toss about that. I'm here to do my job." "Then we're peas in a pod, Inspector," says Dr. Fahey. "Not quite," says Alicia Flint. "The lives we save are cut and dried. We have to do what we can, how we can. Are you a partner in this practice?" "Yes." "You wouldn't want it to be closed down indefinitely?" "Of course not. I hope." "You have had a patient abducted, and a national organisation vehemently opposed to what you practice has claimed responsibility. I'm not sure we wouldn't be derelict in our duty to the public if we allowed such a situation to persist, at least until we have found Zoe Bright." Dr. Fahey sucks her cheeks in and stares at Alicia Flint. After a long while she nods, looks at her watch. "I have an appointment which I simply can't miss." She clears her desk into a drawer, save for one file. She logs off the computer, says, "I'm sorry I can't be more help. Please show yourselves out." All three of them look at Zoe Bright's file on the desk. When Dr. Fahey gets to the door, Alicia Flint says, "You should think about security. I could send an officer down to take names and addresses of everyone entering, and log vehicle registrations too.
That's very kind, but we started doing that ourselves as soon as we heard about Zoe. We are a professional operation, Inspector Flint. We just don't have quite the same access to double standards as some. Thank God. She closes the door, and Flint says to Staffe, "We got there in the end." Staffe is reading the first sheet of the file. "Christ," he says. "What is it?" Zoe Bright signed up for termination. It was going to be today, and Anthony was in the consultation with her. Staffe continues to read, sees Dr. Fay's handwritten notes, a pre-scan required, patient dates dubious. 11. Staffe and Alicia Flint have discussed what to do about Anthony Bright, and for the moment, D.I. Flint has won the argument. Given that the information they have procured is by no means admissible, they will bide their time to use his deceit against him. Now they're in the 10-foot square front room of Teresa and Michael Flanagan on Gladys Street. Teresa and Michael are Zoe's mother and father. This is Toxteth, and dusk has gathered. The kids are playing football in the street, watched over by adults. The women are already in pyjamas, ferrying fish suppers from the Chinese, and the men are in Everton and Liverpool replica tops. Never far away is the searing siren of a pursuit car. Teresa Flanagan dips into her box of Bestco tissues as if they're a dish of peanuts, constantly wiping her eyes and blowing her nose. Michael Flanagan sits silently as Teresa bemoans her daughter's disappearance. On the floor, all today's papers are piled. Teresa has given up on her daughter, says, "I don't know what happened to my girl. All she ever wanted was a family like her sisters. They lead proper lives. But she had to go off to that place, and she never was the same again. I lost her. She was never the same again." "What place?" asks Flint. Teresa addresses Staffe, as she has done throughout, and Alicia Flint quietly fumes. "That university. None of us have ever gone, and it done us no harm. So what made her think she was any better?" "You see her regularly," says Staffe. "Anthony said she came round once a week." "Anthony? Now there's a lad. I thought the first time she brought him round he might sort her out. A lovely lad, sees his mum all the time. She's in Old Swan, and he goes every Sunday tea time to see her. But oh no, I don't know why he said that. We don't see Zoe 1 month to the next." "Teresa," says Michael Flanagan, "it's not like that." He talks into his lap and stirs his mug of tea. "It is, and you know it is. I'm fed up of giving that girl chances." "Why would Anthony say she came round if she didn't?" asked Alicia Flint. "He wouldn't lie, that lad," says Teresa to Staffe. "You're not proud that Zoe is an educated woman," says Flint. "And I bet you don't know that's not her name. Changed it, she did. She was Anna Marie. And one Christmas, that first Christmas she came back, she said she was Zoe. Disowning us, that's what she was playing at." "How did she meet Anthony?" asked Staffe. "Had to come home, didn't she? Tail between her legs when she couldn't get a job with that fancy degree that got her into all that debt. And we put up with her without a word." She looks daggers at Michael, mutters, "Soft lad." Teresa stands up. "They went together at school and she dropped him. But when she came back..." She collects the mugs on a tray. "He did the right thing, like a shot. Loves her to bits, he does." "Zoe was pregnant, so they got married," says Staffe. "What do you think?" says Teresa, leaving the room to get more tea on the go.
End of Disc 2. Disc 3.
As soon as the door closes, and without looking up from his lap, Michael says, "She's the baby, you know. My baby and always has been. She's a lovely girl. Different from the rest.
but I love them all the same. How often did you meet up with her, Mr. Flanagan? Once a week, says Alicia Flint in a softer voice. I never said that. She didn't even tell her mum she was pregnant again, did she? He shakes his head. She would have made a wonderful mam, you know. She will, still, says Alicia Flint, putting a notebook into a briefcase and slipping Michael Flanagan a business card. You should come to see me, Michael, on your own. We'll find Zoe, don't you fret. If there's anything we can do, it'll be done. But we can't be having all these lies. Every hour counts. Every hour, Michael. Staffe follows Flint out. Back on the street, the kids flock around them. I need a drink, says Alicia Flint. Where do you suggest? I have no choice. I've got to get home. It's only round the corner. Well, there's a pub over there. Staffe nods at the Empress, recognising the tall and slim, embossed early Victorian hostelry from the cover of a Ringo Starr album. I have a child, says Alicia. My mum puts him down for 3 hours in the afternoon so I can bathe him. You go to the pub if you want. She gets in and revs the car, and Staffe turns back to the house, sees Michael Flanagan's face in the chink between the nets. His wife must catch him, because he flinches, and the curtains quickly close. Josie checks her watch and looks down the list of contacts that Staffe had distilled from Kerry Degg's phone records, address books, and her old Christmas cards, and from the interviews on the neighbourhood knock. This one is Cello Delaney, a club singer, who sent Kerry a card on her birthday, and was in a phone, and was also mentioned by another singer she had interviewed the day before yesterday, describing Kerry and Cello Delaney as thick as thieves. The house is a tidy little terrace off the New North Road by the Regent's Canal. When the door opens, a smell of cooking oozes from the darkened hallway, and Cello Delaney looks put out. She says, Police! I was wondering when, and steps aside, showing Josie in, not bothering to scrutinise the warrant card. The blues is being sung from the kitchen, and Josie listens. Thinks it might be Billie Holiday. Not her bag, though, so she asks. Bessie Smith, says Cello. Carrie loved her. I miss her already. Cello looks at Josie with wide eyes and smiles as if touched by a good memory. She always came on a Wednesday, and I would make soup. That explains the smell, says Josie. She thinks Cello might be out of it. She looks more intently, sees her pupils are dilated. It's a bit late for lunch. Is it? I don't believe in time. Shelley wants to ask how she gets to her gigs on time, and what would happen if her audience didn't believe in time. Tell me about the fathers, says Josie. The fathers of Kerry's children. She loved them. I never met them, of course, but Kerry would never have slept with anyone she didn't love. And when she had Maya, she absolutely wanted her. But she just couldn't cope. It's a responsibility, isn't it? I remember we went shopping in the market up Dalston, and we got stuff for goat curry and some saucy pants, and some other stuff, and then went to the Nags, and I said, Where's Maya and Miles? And Kerry said, Shit, not again. And Maya was in a pushchair. I mean, how can you forget you're not pushing a pushchair? Cello laughs fondly. And Sean? Where was he when she was with her men? Sean? She was better than him. I don't know why she kept going back to him, but she did. She never loved him. She loved the others. So the two children have different fathers? Cello shrugs. They're both the spit of Kerry. How would I know? It's not Kerry's style to bang on about that sort of thing. She lived in the moment, not the past. Did she want this latest baby? Cello shrugs again. What do you make of Sean? Don't you know he doesn't have any friends? Not any. Only Kerry. I've got to stir my soup.
Josie follows Cello into her kitchen. The units are hand-painted in thick oils, bright colours and abstract. The tiles are multicoloured and jars are everywhere. Vegetable peelings litter the work surface. Cello bends down and opens the oven door. The draught of heat is fierce, and Cello reaches in. Before Josie can call out, Cello takes a hold of the bread tin. When she hears Josie's voice, Cello turns round, the piping hot tin in her hand, and then the pain must prick whatever narcotic bubble she has around her, and Cello screams. But she doesn't drop the tin. She places it onto the worktop and then wrings her hand. "You should put it under water," says Josie. Cello nods, her eyes wide. She holds her hand under a rushing tap and begins to stamp on the ground, moaning. "Shit! I have something for this upstairs." "Shall I go?" "No!" Which arouses Josie's curiosity. She watches Cello go up the stairs, then rushes back into the kitchen, unlocks Cello's phone handset, and clicks through the last numbers called, all the way back to the last time Cello called Kerry, just a week ago. But the call history tells Josie it was not answered. Then she reads the texts, shuffling along the hall and listening for a tread on the stairs. Earlier today, a number not assigned had texted Cello to meet at the Half Moon, tomorrow night. Josie hears Cello on the landing above. She goes back into the kitchen, noting the number that texted Cello, and locks the handset, puts it where she found it. "You say Sean had no friends? But he must have been well connected to be in that game." "What game's that?" "Well, he's an impresario. A curator, he says." "A dodgy cunt is what he is. I don't know how he's got through life without someone having a right pop at him." "Well, I do." "Go on," says Josie, trying not to appear overly interested. "I need to sort this soup, I really do." "Sean had somebody to look out for him. That's what you're saying." "I'm not sure I'm saying anything." "You said you knew why nobody had taken a pop at Sean." Cello suddenly looks more alert. "No, I didn't." Josie nods upstairs, says, "Do I get a tour?" "No." "Never mind." She knows Cello has clammed up, and knows also that there are half moons all over London, but she knows for a fact that the one in Putney is known for its music. Alicia Flint's mother has left, and her daughter is bathing her son, Ethan. Before she disappeared upstairs, in the duplex apartment she owns overlooking Prince's Park, Alicia had tossed a wad of takeaway menus onto the ornate Far Eastern coffee table and given Staffe a bottle of Amstel without even asking. Had said, "You decide. I'm starving, anything spicy." He feels the beer hit his throat and leans back in the sofa, swallows, then takes out his phone, sees he has a missed call from Pulford. He makes the call. "Crawford hadn't left the place or had any visitors for nearly 2 days, says Pulford, "but today she went on the tube." "How do you know?" "I followed her." "I told you not to take any chances. She didn't see me, and I lost her because I didn't get too close. But she had this bag, or she didn't have this bag, but someone gave it to her on the tube, and she gave it to someone else." "You saw it?" "No, but I saw another man with it." "What?" "And he gave it to Vernon Short." "How do you know?" "They met in the Argyle in Oxford Circus, and Short had the bag when he left the pub." "The same bag?" Staffe hears Alicia coming down the stairs. "It must be. What are the chances?" Staffe smiles at Alicia and raises his eyebrows, to give the impression it is an unwanted social call. "What should I do?" asked Pulford. Well, things are fine up here, says Staffe. You take it easy. He hangs up, thinking how it suits them, for Leslie Crawford to know Vernon Short, for there to have been contact. "What did you order?" asks Alicia Flint, now in a running vest and jogging bottoms, her hair in a high-up ponytail and all her makeup scrubbed away. Her skin sings. "Don't you cook?" "You've got to be joking." "I'll do her something," says Staffe, standing up, going into the open-plan kitchen area, which has a window overlooking the park. Way down below, it's getting dark. A group of youths with straining killer dogs loiter by the gates, exchanging something barely disguised. "Can I?" "Go ahead." He opens a cupboard. "I can't wait till we can hit Anthony Bright with that appointment at the clinic. Why'd he lie to us?" says Alicia, beside him in the kitchen. She pulls a beer from the fridge. "I don't know what you'll find to cook. Rusks and baby jars is all I buy," she laughs, swigging from her bottle. She bends down, reaches into a cupboard, and plonks a butternut squash on the work surface. "I don't know what to do with this. Mom brought it round." "Do you have any garam masala?" "What?" "It's okay," says Staffe, finding some cumin and chili powder at the back of the spice cupboard. He toasts the cumin and puts the oven on, dices the squash, and thinks about whether to tell Alicia Flint about the connection they might have established between Leslie Crawford and Vernon Short. He roughly measures out the risotto rice and pops the kettle on to make an instant stock. "What's happening your end? Any news about Sean Degg or that bloody Crawford woman?" she says. "How spicy do you want this?" "Is there something you're not telling me?" she says. "As soon as I know anything, you'll know. I need to make a quick call." "What did your DS do to piss you off?" "My DS?" She frowns. "Don't take me for a fool, Inspector." "He followed Leslie Crawford and lost her." "Could she be tied up with a private member's bill of that idiot Short?" "It'd be nice," he says. "Very nice," says Alicia. "You better make your call, and as much chili as you like for me." Staffe shakes up the roasting squash and puts the boiled water to the bouillon, then calls Finbar Hare, his old friend and string-puller. It is no surprise that he gets no response. At this hour, Finn will either be sleeping off a long lunch or having an aperitif, either with his beautiful wife or somebody else's. He says, into that message board in the ether, "It's Staffe. Just wondered about getting together sometime. Give me a call. And, I'm looking for a job for someone I know. He's pretty desperate. Just something menial. It doesn't matter, really, just to keep him occupied. Better if it didn't involve a police check. He's a good lad. Love to flick, and let's hook up sometime." He blows out his cheeks, trousers his phone, and gets a raise of the eyebrows from Alicia Flint, who is pulling out another pair of Amstels from her fridge. The light flicks off, and her heart hurdles a beat. After hour upon hour of nothing happening, just the slow arc of the sun and the pale fading of the weather against the Welsh hills, Zoe is nervous of change. The man and the woman who come, in masquerade masks and black raincoats, keep telling her she need not worry. They asked her about the baby and gave her a vitamin supplement. It will be soon, she thinks. It feels soon, sooner than the date she gave the doctor. The last baby was too soon, too small, too weak. She closes her book in the dark. She has been reading it slowly and deliberately, so as not to be without it. She has tried to get inside the mind of Toni Morrison, to distinguish her from the narrator. The task stretches the book and exercises her mind, something she has learnt to do in private. Zoe undresses and slides between the sheets on the mattress, which she has moved to beneath the window. Last night the moon was unobscured. Not so tonight. The shapes within the room emerge slowly from the dark as her eyes adjust. She passes her hand across her belly in slow circles. The baby hasn't kicked since after lunch. She wishes it would. She closes her eyes, remembers the look on the doctor's face as they agreed upon a termination. The woman was insisting on a final scan, but there was no smear of emotion, no hint of the right and wrong of it. And before she finds sleep, in those bulrushes between the conscious and the not, Zoe wonders whether, if this one dies, it will find its brother. And she dreams that when she wakes, she is crying. She begins to dream that she is between the leaves of a book, listening to this stupid woman cry. 12. A sea fret comes up from Albert Dock and drifts around the sandstone monolith of Liverpool's Anglican Cathedral, which broods high above cobbled Huskisson Street. Below, the city slopes away from Staffe. Above the seam of mist, he can see the sun glint on the hills, which must be Wales. Staffe has stopped by the entrance to a Bale hostel, fashioned within a grand neoclassical house. He looks behind him, up to the beautiful, stately Faulkner Square, where the brass is already out, tricking or buying their daily dose. Boys in black tracksuits and black trainers skulk with their hoods drawn up. Somewhere a peal of laughter smooths through the mist. It is the sound of students. He checks the address he jotted down from the stamp in Zoe's books and carries on. Before long he sees the large Chinese arch and carries on past, down Duke Street. There are more junkies in these streets, just one block off the main drag, and even though it isn't yet 10 o'clock in the morning, they are carrying cans of super-strength lager as if they were styrofoams of coffee. The Curious Cat is no ordinary bookshop. Tucked away between a done-up boozer and a fancy Japanese restaurant, it is in a double-fronted, rickety Victorian building that opens out into a small bazaar. The sandwich board at the entrance to the indoor market tells you these are shops for the socially aware, funding the victims of government crime. It says, "If you care, shop here." Above the entrance, on a cracked plastic banner in red letters, "All proceeds to the victims of government crime." The Curious Cat is opposite a tattoo parlour called Free Ink. Behind its counter, chewing on an unlit roll-up and reading The Guardian, is a dreadlocked woman aged 30 or thereabouts. She smells of cat, and Staffe wonders if this could be deliberate. She looks up and frowns at Staffe, sussing him for precisely what he is. "I ain't done nothing wrong," she says. Staffe ignores her, clocks that a final demand for her council tax is lying on The Guardian. Ms. Petal Broom of 102 Devonshire Road. He mooches around the bookshop, winding up and down between the shelves which go back and back. The books are mainly fiction and travel, but there are good sections on politics and biography too. They are alphabetized and fairly priced. Every now and then he takes a book down, flicks through, thinking about the lives the books have had before. It makes him wish he had more time to read. Miss Broom comes up to him, says, "I'm going for a fag. Don't nick nout." "Don't you want to know why I'm here?" "Couldn't give a toss. I'm clean." "There's a woman shops here, mid-20s, smartly dressed. She comes regularly. Called Zoe."
"Zoe? She won't take no money for 'em. The deal is we buy our books back. We pay half what they paid if they bring 'em back so long as they're in good nick. We sell some dozens of times. It's a good cause."
"Who do you give your profits to?"
"It's a co-op. There's plenty causes, political-like. We're very political."
"When did you last see Zoe?" The woman shrugs. She's missing, Petal. How do you know my name? I want to help her. We're not all bastards, you know. Petal shrugs. She's nice enough. Sometimes she brings me ginseng tea, proper stuff, not Starbucks shit. What's happened to her? She was having a baby. Do you believe in a woman's right to choose, Petal? Up to the woman to decide if she's a right to choose. She'll be due soon. She'll have finished that Toni Morrison. And an A.L. Kennedy. Do you have another beloved? Petal slinks away and comes back with the dog-eared copy. He gives her a £5. When Petal gives him the change, he leaves a quid for her, says, "Have a ginseng tea." Week or so since she's been in. She's not come to no harm, has she? Staffe gives her a card with his number on. Can practically hear Petal's cogs whir. She's in trouble. That's for sure. Do you have anything to tell me? Petal shakes her head. You ever see her with anyone else? A fella? A fella? Nah. A woman, then, or women? Petal shakes her head. If she's a friend of yours, you should tell me if Zoe said anything unusual, if she was planning a change. She can't change. She's got a baby coming, hasn't she? Petal says this with a disapproving gurn of her face. Look, I hope she's okay, I really do. She's a good woman, an intelligent woman. But I've nothing to say about that girl. Pulford says to Josie, I could go in on my own, you know. You think it's too risque for me, David? She gives him a knowing sidelong glance and looks up at the rendezvous. You should know better than that. A distant memory wafts through the unilluminated glass doors. Tonight the curious will queue beneath the pink and blue neon, waiting for their fix of Philip Ramone's Taste of Old Soho. He was here before they cleaned it up, and he's still here. Pulford raps on the glass, and they wait. Josie came here with a hen party years and years ago, and then, just a couple of years since, on a weird date. She should have known better. The rendezvous is no place for a second date. Nobody comes, and Pulford raps again. The bloke who brought her here was a doctor, for crying out loud. And he had tried to show her the middle toilet, one for girls, one for boys, and the middle one for the unsure or inquisitive. Dr. Finney had certainly possessed an inquiring mind. Inside, the light flickers on, and a big man comes. He walks slowly, wide-gated, as if he has a problem down there. He mouths something through the glass, and his face is angry. He has black stubble all over his head and a low hairline. Pulford takes out his warrant card and holds it to the glass. The big man talks into his lapel, squints at the warrant card as he speaks. He unlocks the door, and as he heaves it open, he breathes heavily. Smells of garlic. What you want? Mr. Ramone. What you want? It's about a woman called Kerry Degg. The man turns his back, which pushes out against his chalk-striped jacket. He has haunches like a bull and a small waist. He talks into his lapel again, turns and says, Yo, looky. They follow the man in, through the lobby with the ticket office on the right and the cloakroom on the left. The place smells of too many humans and bleach. However, when they make their way past the 3 toilets and round along the raised dining area opposite the stage, the smell evolves into a blend of booze and grease paint and cologne. The lights are dim, but you can almost hear the echo garble of good times. A bodiced woman, or man, in a spotlight, crooning, seducing the willing. Philip Ramone is in an office off the first floor, up a winding stairway and past a raised mezzanine with 6 small tables, tied up against a gold-speckled balustrade which overlooks the stage. The proprietor, and this is only one of 6 businesses he runs in this parish, is waif-thin, and has his legs crossed like a 40s Hollywood dame. Talks with a cigarette drooping from his lips, which appear to have a tattooed outline, so that they can be distinguished from the rest of his grey face. He has a pencil moustache, which Josie thinks must be to draw his gender. His hair is silvery thin and back-combed into a candy fluff that almost covers his skull. The light is low, and his voice disarmingly so. The big man sits down next to him. "You offered Kerry Degg a residency," says Josie. Ramon has a standard lamp on behind him, and she has to squint. Plumes of smoke curl around him. "Kerry? Oh, you mean Laurie. Laurie dos Passos." "That's her stage name," says Pulford. "And you have come to that stage. This is her world." "Was." "Yes, I heard. A tragedy." "When did you last see her, Mr. Ramon?" asked Josie. Ramon shifts, square to Pulford. He might have taken a shine to the tall young policeman. "I thought I'd done something to upset her. Either that, or her idiot husband had her shipped away onto a cruise. Have the child at sea, perhaps. The shame of it." He laughs unconvincingly at his own joke. Josie says, "Would you say Kerry was upset at the pregnancy?" Ramon leans forward, presses a button on his telephone. "Not upset. Pissed off, more like. Her career, her blooming life was about to take off. She was going to get rid, that's for sure." "And you encouraged her?" "Me? I love children." He laughs. "It was really of no consequence to me." "But what about the residency?" "We have a very mixed clientele, but they're decent people. Nobody would have objected to a pregnancy, except maybe the last month or so. That would have been her pigeon." He laughs again, louder, lights another cigarette. An elderly woman appears through the door, stands beside Ramon and reads from a diary as if it was sacred text. "Miss Dos Passos was last here officially in December, the 28th, but if I recall, she did come to the Hooterfanny." "Oh, yes," says Ramon, "New Year's Eve. Oh, my, that is some time ago. Has she been gone so long?" "You replaced her residency," says Josie. "I have a public, miss." "Have you seen her husband since then?" says Pulford. "An irascible little scrote." Pulford smiles at Ramon. "I wouldn't have put her with him. Still, it was Sean's offspring this time, apparently." "You surprise me." "He calls himself a curator." "He's nothing more than a pimp." "A pimp with connections. Tell us about Sean's connections," says Josie. "What do you mean?" Ramon regards his cigarette, takes a deep drag as if it was his last, and stubs it out. He smiles at Pulford. "I don't know his connections. I doubt you'll find anybody does. If I were you, young man, I would let that sleeping dog be. Now, if you wish to talk further, you can arrange an appointment with June here, but I must tell you I have little to add." Josie says, "We know for a fact that someone looked out for Sean." Ramon smiles at her. "I liked Kerry, and I'm sad she's gone. But I don't make the world we're up against. I have to try to survive it." "And we are only trying to make it easier to survive. We're not on opposite sides, Mr. Ramon. Are we?" He smiles at Pulford and pulls 2 tickets from his desk, hands them to the detective sergeant. "These are good for any night. Come along. I have nothing to hide, But I am a terribly busy man. Terribly. 13. Staffe climbs up to Alicia Flint's flat. When he gets to the second floor, her place is open. From the door, he watches Alicia hold her boy tight, his head nestled into the shallow of her collarbone. With her free hand, she takes his meal from the microwave. "You hungry, young man?" she says to her boy, Ethan. The flat is 2-storey, but the whole of this floor is open plan. 3 large windows look out onto Prince's Park. Every now and then, Alicia checks her watch whilst she feeds young Ethan. Staffe reckons he is 8 months or so. He can't walk, can't talk. Staffe wants to ask what happened to Dad, but doesn't. Ethan pushes the food from his mouth with his tongue. "You enjoying our fine city?" she asks Staffe, looking at Ethan. "I like it. It's more a big village after London. I even went to a second-hand bookshop yesterday, The Curious Cat." "Lucky to have time to read." "It's where Zoe Bright got her books." "How do you know that?" Alicia looks up at him accusingly. "I wonder if you could check up on someone called Petal Broom. She runs the shop. Be nice to have a carrot to dangle." "Or a stick." "Petal's holding out on you, is she?" Staffe goes to the windows, looks out across the park. The sky is big here, and gulls squawk. He wonders where Zoe Bright might be, and is she reading her beloved, her baby inside her? The entryphone buzzer goes, and Alicia lets them in without talking, and says, "It's odd, chasing down Anthony Bright and the Flanagans, and having this political angle too, especially when you've practically got a confession from that Crawford bitch." "We can't touch her," says Staffe. "And the politicians are only people too, the same urges and regrets and broken homes." He stops himself. He and Alicia look at each other, and he wonders how well he will come to know her. Alicia's mother comes in and seems startled to see Staffe. She raises her eyebrows, and Alicia says, "Don't start, Mum." She hands Ethan across and whispers something to her mother, which makes them both laugh. As they make their way down, Alicia bemoans the fact that they can't haul Leslie Crawford in and give her the 3rd degree. Staffe thinks twice, says, "Don't you have mixed feelings? You're a mother. A part of you—" "No, absolutely not. We work the law, don't we? There's nothing but violation going on here. But if we were to find Zoe Bright now, right now, that's what we have to do. It's all we have to do." "I know, but I'm not a mother." "You ever get close?" laughs Alicia, popping the locks to her car. He watches her get into the car, thinks he might enjoy spending the day with her. As he gets in, he says, "Let's think politics then." "Aha, you're on my wavelength, Inspector. Let me introduce you to a friend of mine." She pulses the accelerator, indicates, looks over her shoulder and tears out into the road, cutting up a cab, and keeping it in second all the way to 5,000 revs. It takes them 6 minutes to get from Alicia's flat to Declan Hartson's office in the centre of town. They park up on Water Street, and Staffe looks up at the civic glory of Liverpool's central business district, its aspic wealth. They're shown straight to Hartson's office, where the councillor sits behind a 6-foot partner's desk. He doesn't get up. Staffe can tell the time by looking at the dial on the Liver building through the window behind the diminutive, cheeky chap. Staffe recognises him vaguely, and Hartson must clock this. "We had our moment in the sun back in the 80s. Didn't we, Leash?" "Speak for yourself," says Alicia Flint. "I was a child." "She believed too, and then she joined the police. A great loss." Alicia Flint helps herself to a glass of water and takes a seat. "Do you have that list, Declan?" He hands her a sheet of paper, and Flint puts on her glasses, reads, turns over the paper. Meanwhile, Staffe gets the feeling that the cut of his jib isn't to Hartson's liking. If he recalls correctly, Hartson was once an MP, involved with the far left. He has a slender recollection of scandal. "Nice office," he said. "Bourgeois spoils. I'd rather the money went to those who need it, but what can I do? We rage and we rage, but the machine just gets stronger. See anything you like, Leash?" Flint hands the list to Staffe, says, "This is every political group with an official presence on Merseyside." "No breath of life?" "There's plenty of right-to-life organisations here, as you'd expect. We're Dublin's eastern suburb, so some say. The church isn't what it was, but even so." "Did you ever come across Vernon Short when you were in Westminster?" says Staffe. "We overlapped. He loved it. Always in this bar or that, supping on the cheap." "He's having his time in the sun." "He's a bastard. Doesn't believe in anything apart from himself. I don't know who put him up to that bill of his." "Put him up to it?" asked Staffe. "His own party's against it. Isn't he just being bloody-minded? A final throw." "He's his father's son. We have to do better than our fathers, don't we? I'd say he was trying to gain some leverage with the PM or the Home Secretary. But that would take balls, and Vernon isn't overly endowed in that department. He'll be acting from fear if I know him." "Fear?" "Oh, cash, of course. That's a common cause." "Does he have hidden depths?" "We all have hidden depths, Inspector. Even me," laughs Declan, too chirpily for Staffe's liking. "The Rope Walks Caucus, Declan. Do you know them?" says Alicia. "A few charity shops. We extended their council tax exemption the other month, all in a good cause." He looks quite pious now. "They have a good bookshop." "You come across a woman called Petal Broom?" "Ah, Broom. Her mother's an old SWP mate of mine." He taps his nose. "We go back. Virginia Broom. Did she have any particular bees in her beret?" "Oh, the usual. Palestine mainly, and C&E. "Right to choose?" "Of course. But she had her girl when she was young and on her own. I wouldn't have thought." Councillor Hartson seems to drift into a private space. He plays with his lip with finger and thumb. "This is to do with that Zoe Bright. Am I wrong? They kidnapped her." "Not for me to say, Declan." "Direct action. Sounds so archaic now." A nostalgic glaze forms upon Hartson's face. "Got to take your hat off." "You're just an old traditionalist," says Alicia Flint, standing. "You'll scratch my back sometime, won't you, Leash?" "What do you have for me?" "Virginia Broom is on the dragon's tail." Baby Grace seems to look straight at Josie. Could this be the first time she's opened her eyes? She's stock still, pin-cushioned with her nutrient tubes. Josie rubs her eyes, knows she should get some sleep. Grace's eyes close. A nurse comes in and Josie says, "Can she see?" "It'll be a blur for her, my love. It's early days." The nurse smiles at Josie as if she's a child. She cheerily jots on the board that hangs from the side of the monitor, then flicks each of the tubes that lead from the plastic sacks down into the baby's blood and stomach. When Josie has to leave, she seeks out the nurse, the jolly golden-haired one called Natalie, to make sure she has her mobile number in case anything happens, but she can't find her. In a recess down the corridor from Grace's room, there's another nurse she has seen before. This one has sad, dark eyes. "Can you give this to Nurse Natalie?" says Josie. handing her number across. "Who are you?" The dark nurse's eyes flit. She looks as if she might burst into tears at any moment. Her name card says Eve Delahunty. Josie takes the card back, not wanting to burden her. As she goes down the corridor, she looks back, and Nurse Eve makes her way towards Grace's room. Outside, it has turned cold in the city, and the early breath of summer seems to have expired. The sky is black and full of rain. Josie thinks about the people she has met since she found Grace. Sean Degg and Cello Delaney and Philip Ramone. And even though she's dead on her feet, they all pull her west, to the half moon. Vernon Short tucks in his shirt, precisely buttons up his flies. He thumbs up his braces, then shifts the way he is dressed. He regards himself in the mirror and, for some reason, finds himself recalling the day he gave his maiden speech to the House. He takes his jacket from the hook on the back of the stall door. His heart beats fast, and he considers where all the years and the hope went. He shoots his cuffs. He can still see the young man, can still feel the principles, even though they were trampled into the Westminster earth a long time ago. He wonders what might be in his blood. Are they finally going to see what he has to offer? He looks at his notes, writ small in his fastidious hand on a business card. According to the Telegraph, 60% of the people are now with him on the bill. Today, baby Grace has been relegated to page 5. The Liverpool woman hasn't caught nationally. It will, if there is a baby, but that's not now, not today. Politics is a 24-hour game these days. He checks his watch. A minute late already for the Home Secretary. Who would have thought it? Vernon breathes deep, thinks of his father, once a vociferous backbencher, and universally regarded as one of the last of the House's true characters, a landed, fuck-them-all freethinker. That look in his father's eye, when he visits him on the farm in Sussex for the monthly Saturday lunch, dismounting after the drag hunt, 4 sheets to the wind and evaluating his son, no disgrace, but not nearly a match. "Bastards," he says, aloud, opening the door, stepping out into the halls he always dreamed he would bestride. They think he is a fool, but he got a double first, and salvaged the family firm in the late 80s. In his time at Westminster, he has body-swerved all the scandals. No mud stuck to Vernon, somehow. But he was born just beyond his time, until now. He looks up the corridor. It is a 5-minute walk from here. "Bastards," he says again, striding towards Catherine Killick, Home Secretary. Killick opens the door herself, shows Vernon in even though she has people to do that for her. The modern way. She is 10 years his junior, and it's an airbrushed, widely known secret that Killick was militantly pro-choice when she first cut her teeth on politics. Since Blair and the bland new Clause 4, though, it has been a relentless drift towards the centre for Cathy, especially after she was made a parliamentary private secretary to the PM when he was in trade. She pours Vernon's tea. Vernon. A man, a type she has always despised. She beams the best smile she can at him, but she won't fuck about. "We can't be having this turn into a circus, Vernon," she says. "Serendipity," says Vernon. Cathy Killick puts down his tea on her desk and goes behind, rests her feet up on a stool to the side of her desk, and interlocks her fingers on her swollen, pregnant tummy. "Serendipity is a wanky shop for hippies that sells Indian scarves and moonstones up Camden Market. Been going for years. There's nothing real about serendipity. It's just what we're dealt, and as you know, we can change what we're dealt. The baby is still in the papers. All this whole family claptrap. I thought that was our claptrap, Home Secretary. Word is, your bill would pass if it went before the House today.
says Cathy Killick. Well, let us hope. We're up for debate next week. For what exactly do you hope, Vernon? To serve my country. What would it take to do that? I don't think the country really wants this bill. We certainly don't want our legislation flapping like dirty laundry. I don't write the headlines. And journalists don't make law. Killick adjusts her posture, sighs heavily, looks Vernon dead in the eye. Nor do they understand you, Vernon. You have pedigree and you have integrity. I need statesmen, Vernon. I need you with me. In what capacity? We've been talking about you. We? You know there's a reshuffle in June. What are you saying? Vernon tries to remain calm, but there is a bubble between his heart and his stomach. He barely dare listen. Your father was in education. He nods. Briefly. Beyond, he can see the splendid white fondant of Whitehall, high above the people. He was his own man in the end. Well, it wouldn't do to follow. The PM wanted about enterprise. With your connections in the city, we wondered if you might be able to spearhead our clampdown on bonuses. Tighten up on derivatives, headline stuff. You're good at that. Minister for Enterprise, murmurs Vernon, not believing his own words. Cathy Killick presses a button on her laptop, and across the room a printer begins to softly hum as the laser does its work. Pick it up and have a read, she says, nodding to the printer and smiling wide. We thought you might say something along these lines. Once Vernon has closed the door behind him, Cathy Killick places a hand on her baby within, says, Who in God's name does he think he is? She reflects, considers her rise to this moment and all the prices she paid. How much of her is left? Staffe watches as Alicia Flint gets to work on Petal Broom. She talks softly, touching Petal's elbow and guiding her towards a pair of chairs at the back of the Curious Cat, where they sit opposite each other, shoulders rounded, talking about what might possibly be happening to Zoe Bright. Every now and then, Petal looks across at Staffe. Alicia Flint says, Will, perhaps you could get us some tea. Ginseng, says Staffe. As he goes, Alicia Flint flicks him a wink. By the time Staffe returns with the tea, Petal is shaking her head, saying over and over again, No, I don't trust you. It's a violation. A bloody violation. The smallest detail could help us find Zoe, and if we don't find her... Staffe says, The woman in London died. They abducted her and held her for weeks, living with rats and having to shit where she lay. If Zoe was here, and she heard you pontificating about violations, what would she say? And what if it's not like that? What I say will be for nothing. What do you say? Inspector, says Flint, standing, silently beseeching him not to undo her good work. Petal looks self-righteous, says, All you need is jackboots and a black shirt. What? Shouts Staffe. He feels his blood surge. Something in his mind floods. He hates this cheap illusion. He breathes deep, takes a step away and measures his anger by the look on Alicia Flint's face. Okay, he says. I could spend all day explaining why you're more of a fascist than I am, but let's not bother, hey? Let's talk about your mother, Petal. I hear she's using again. And if she's using, she'll be paying for it somehow, a little scam, bit of shoplifting, maybe benefit fraud. Good old victimless crimes in your book, I suppose, comrade. Petal has regained her composure. Go fuck yourself. Who was Zoe with? Where did she hang out? Says Alicia. You don't fool me, says Petal. Alicia Flint looks up, at the roof, across to the stairs. She stands up. This place is a danger to the public. I'll give you till 5 o'clock tomorrow to come up with something. Otherwise,
You're closed down. Outside, Staffe says, "You don't mess about." Alicia Flint gets into the car and revs it up, says, "But that's all I'm doing. I can't touch her mother or the premises. Not unless I want to be on the front page of the Echo and have everyone in the city knowing what we're up to. Like you said, it's a big village and all the neighbours are nosy. And I don't need you fucking my interviews up." She looks over her shoulder, sees a line of traffic and curses. As she turns back, she catches Staffe looking at her. There is a car's-length gap in the stream of traffic, and Alicia Flint cuts in, gets the horn and a finger from the car behind. She gives it back and turns to look the driver behind in the eye. He backs off. 14. It is with immeasurable regret that I have to consider the withdrawal of the private member's bill proposing the reduction in the legal limit for the termination of pregnancies. I remain committed to the cause of maintaining the highest standards of care for pregnant mothers and their unborn children, but am concerned for the integrity of this legislative solution in the light of what can only be described as a media circus, and indeed the spate of criminal activity which has appended itself to the bill. I have been in the House for nearly 20 years, and cannot stand by and watch the integrity of Parliament being compromised in this way. I have every confidence in the ability of the government to continue to represent the interests of mothers, and this issue will continue to be addressed through the consultative and legislative process, unhindered by those who seek to undermine our country's revered democratic standing. Staffe watches the television. Vernon Short folds up the piece of paper, placing it in the inside pocket of his double-breasted jacket. He smiles into camera, Big Ben beyond, and is strobe lit by dozens of flashing cameras. The journalists call out questions, but Vernon simply raises his hand and smiles some more, as if he is associated with a great success. Alicia Flint smells of chamomile, and her hair falls in thick, wet thongs. She wears a short-topped, low-trousered velour tracksuit, and her midriff is tanned and taut. She bounces Ethan on her lap across the room from Staffe. Ethan is naked. His legs are strong. She says, "I wonder what they've promised that sanctimonious scrotum." "He'll be tucked into some obscure ministry in the next reshuffle," says Staffe. "These are people's lives they're fooling around with. Big decisions. At least it'll bring Leslie Crawford from out of her cover. That breath of life lot will have to respond." "I'm worried about Zoe. Christ, what will they do to that poor girl if there's nothing to be gained?" Alicia puts Ethan in his baby walker and spins him round. He chortles, pushes himself up with his legs and claps his hands. She reaches into her briefcase, pulls out a stack of papers and lays them on the coffee table in front of the sofa. "I can do this on my own." Staffe wants to ask about Ethan's father, how he came to abandon them, or otherwise. "It'll be quicker, the two of us." He takes the Zoe stack of papers, and they go through them independently. Copies of all the interviews and the data for Zoe and Kerry, and their parents and loved ones. Alicia Flint takes the Kerry Degg pile. "How shall we play Anthony Bright?" asked Staffe. "We can disclose to him that we know about Zoe's termination now. And the fact that we know he went with her to the clinic. But you'll need a gentler touch than you showed with Petal Broom. He's lied to us, and we need to know why. Do you really think he had anything to do with Zoe going missing?" Staffe reads through the notes which draw the profile of Zoe Bright's professional and domestic rituals. It seems she moved within a small circle. Her colleagues at the university's resource centre said she was quiet, committed, kept herself to herself. Her university email history revealed nothing untoward, and her only indulgences were a penchant for second-hand book sites and literary blogs. Staffe flicks back through his notes, goes through the inventory of the house, looks at 2 items: a collection of cartons for potted shrimps and ice cream tubs. She used the former for earrings, the latter for her necklaces, bursting with bright gems, each from a place called Parkgate. "Where's Parkgate?" he calls through to Alicia Flint. "Across the water. It's worth a day trip before you head back. When are you going back to London?" "You look dead on your feet," says Pulford, pushing through the crowd, holding the drinks out to Josie. "I got you a vodka Red Bull." "So I won't be able to sleep. Cheers." "There's a band on in the back. Fancy it?" "We're here to see whether Cello Delaney shows, and who with." Josie has her hair frizzed and is wearing a beret. No eye makeup, but blood-red lipstick. Enough to wipe her off Cello Delaney's radar. "I'm not sure about the new look." "Oh, David, I'm so sorry. There was I hoping it would make you swoon. I so want you to adore me." This had been Pulford's night off, until Josie persuaded him away, and he's already had a couple of drinks. "But I do. You know that. We have history, remember? Pulford, that was years ago, and we both agreed it was a mistake." "Maybe I like mistakes." Josie turns her back on him, looks around the room. She can't see Cello Delaney, and it's already gone 9. A rhythm section starts up in the back room, and she says, "Let's try the band. Cello might be in there." Pulford reaches for his warrant card, and Josie takes a hold of his hand, says, "You may as well have come in a helmet if you show that." He pays them in, and leads her around the back room as the sax pipes up, playing the opening bars of Night in Tunisia. He holds onto her hand and leans down, talks into her ear. "I'll be your cover. The things I do for the love of the law." And he puts his arm over her shoulder. "Don't push it." "Well, don't blow my cover," he laughs, drinking from his bottle of Moretti and watching the band on the stage, picturing Cello Delaney from the publicity shots Josie had shown him on the way over. He gets a nudge in the ribs, and Josie reaches up with a hand, whispers into his ear, "Bingo! Just by the stage, with the old fella. On the right." "Where?" "Ah. Let's wander round. See if I can get him in a picture on my phone." Pulford slides his arm from her shoulder, begins to back away towards the door, taking Josie's hand, and bringing her with him as the sax player finishes his chorus and takes the applause. Moves away to the side of the stage, where he picks up his drink and raises it to Cello Delaney. Except it's not Cello so much as the older fellow the sax player is toasting. "There's no need for a photograph," says Pulford. "I don't trust my memory. I can do it. It'll look like I'm taking one of the band." "I know him." The older fella is right by the stage now, chinking his drink with the saxophonist and saying something that makes Cello and the horn player both laugh. Tonight she seems less out of it, and while the 2 men smile and nod their heads to the piano player's 8-bar solo, the smile fades quickly. She looks as if she'd rather be somewhere else. Pulford says into Josie's ear, "He's Tommy Given. I came across him during my stint at the Met." "Rings a bell," says Josie on tiptoes. She likes Pulford's aftershave, and it brings the better part of her memory back on a breeze. "Why should I know him?" "Because he's a bad bastard." "15. Staffe takes a sharp intake, flicks a look across to Alicia Flint as he begins to glean what he can from Anthony Bright. Her hair is scraped back, clipped up meticulously into a plaited bun. Her cheeks glow and her eyes are bright. She sits erect, wearing a tailored chocolate-brown suit. The police station is 2 miles from her home, 1,000,000 miles from Ethan bouncing on her knee. For some reason he feels nervous. "Anthony, it is time we were honest with each other, so I'll start." Anthony Bright's expression changes. Since they came in, he had sat with his head high and his back straight, hands clasped loosely. Now he stiffens, looks across to his solicitor, then back to Staffe. "I have deceived you, Anthony. I chose not to tell you that I have spoken to Zoe's parents, and I didn't tell you I've been to see Petal Broom. Soon I will know as much about Zoe as anyone, save you. Save me. So you have to realise that you can't spend the next days and weeks trying to guess what we know, or should I say, what we might not know. Every day we get a little closer." "You'll find Zoe, then?" "And what took her away? Does that make you nervous, Anthony?" "Why should it?" "You said Zoe visited her parents every week. She didn't. Is that a lie, or do you simply not know your wife?" "I know her all right." "You shouldn't feel ashamed." "Ashamed? Why would I be ashamed?" Staffe smiles at him, reaches out with a hand and clasps his arm, says, "You've had your chance. Coming clean would have helped us all." He stands, and Alicia Flint takes his seat. Staffe leans against the wall, arms across his chest. Anthony's brow puckers, as if he's trying to solve a riddle. "How were things between you and Zoe, you know?" says Alicia. "Normal." "Really?" "She's having a baby, for fuck's sake." "She is a curious, educated woman, different from you." Things were fine, just fine." "People are complex. Zoe went away and came back. She even changed her name, didn't she?" Staffe intervenes. But you didn't tell us that either." Alicia Flint ignores Staffe, says, "She was mixed up. Caught between two worlds. She didn't really know what she wanted, did she?" "She wanted to be with me. We got married." "She wasn't the same when she came back from university, was she?" "I was the first, I know that. And she's the only woman I can love." He looks down at his shoes, then up at Alicia Flint. "You probably think I'm a sad fuck, but you don't know how lucky I am. I trust you. And if we don't find her, at least nobody else will ever have her," says Staffe. "You don't know what you're talking about." "She was going to get rid of the baby, wasn't she, Anthony?" says Alicia Flint. "You went with her," says Staffe. "No." "You lied to us. Now tell us the truth." "Inspector," says Alicia Flint. "Tell me!" "You don't get it, do you?" says Anthony. He bites his lip as if in pain. He leans forward, arms crossed, holding his knees beneath the desk. "Forget your pride. I have tried to love other women, like when Zoe went away, and I probably don't understand her, but I'll tell you on my life and her life and the baby's life, there's nothing I can't forgive. Nothing. And that makes me hate myself sometimes." He leans back now and he is scratching, jabbing at his wrist. He grimaces. Anthony Bright leans further back, and the whites of his eyes roll up, and he topples from his chair, and his solicitor gets down on her knees, screams, "Get someone! Get someone!" Staffe rushes across, bends to pull up Anthony Bright, but Anthony's eyes have gone. He's passed out. And as Staffe reaches for him, he sees Anthony has 4 short lengths of pencil in his hand, broken to the size of cigarette butts, and taped together, sharp as nails. Blood begins to pool on the floor, seams of red ribboning from his wrist. He has Anthony in his arms and looks up at Alicia Flint. For the briefest moment, before she calls for help, she looks daggers at Staffe, as if this was his fault. By the look of her, Cello Delaney had stayed the distance last night with Tommy Given and maybe the band. Her hair is all over the place, and her face is puffy and grey. She smells of drink and a recent cigarette.
"What the fuck?" she says, peering at Josie and Pulford. "Who's the boy?"
"This is D.S. Pulford," says Josie. "He wants to know a little more about the company you keep." "You can let us in, Cello," says Pulford. "I'll make you a coffee."
"I don't have to let you in."
"And we don't have to talk to you. I guess we could go round to see Tommy Given, ask him what it is that he gets from a friendship with Cello Delaney, best mates with murdered Kerry Degg."
"I can see who I like."
"If that's what you want." She steps back, runs both hands through her hair and rubs her temples with the balls of her hands.
"You followed me."
"We got better things to do, Cello. It's a question of reliable sources." She trudges away down the hallway. Today, Fleetwood Mac are sultry in her kitchen. "Stevie Nicks," says Josie. "Perfect for hangovers." "I like rumours," says Pulford. "It's sometimes a way to skin a rabbit." "Tommy's a friend is all." "In the music business?"
"Kind of."
"And a friend of Kerry's too, I bet?"
"Well, they know each other. Kerry knew a lot of people, and so does Tommy. This isn't such a big city, you know."
"We were talking about Kerry and her men the last time I was here," says Josie.
"Do you know who Tommy is?"
Cello sneers. "We can do you a favour," says Josie. "We can get you out of this mire you've talked your way into."
"I'm in no mire."
"Without you, there's no way we would have linked Tommy Given to Kerry. I suppose, if he asked, we'd tell him that you led us to him." Cello Delaney sits down heavily in a chair at a small table in the corner of her kitchen. She lights up a cigarette and says, "Fuck," as Pulford makes them all a cup of coffee. Eventually, Cello says, "How can I trust you?" "How can you not?" says Josie.
"I don't know anything, not really."
"Give us what you've got and you're safe."
"Safe?"
"Just like Sean. You're the one who said Sean was being looked after. It's Tommy who makes him safe, right?" She nods, appraising the tip of her cigarette. "And what about Kerry? What did Tommy Given do for her?"
"Got her that residency is all I know."
"At Rendezvous? Why would he do that?" Cello shrugs. She takes a coffee from Pulford and lobs her cigarette into the sink. Sparks up another. Staffe walks away from Anthony Bright's dream home. From what Alicia Flint has told him, it was always Anthony's dream to have a home like this. The garden suburb is where a certain sort of aspiring couple would want to be. He notices the apple blossom is out. It's too soon. There could still be a frost, and then there will be no fruit. He thinks about the row he had with Alicia Flint after Anthony's assault on himself. Whether it was a cry for help or a flight from interrogation, Alicia Flint had blamed Staffe for pushing Anthony too far. But they both know Anthony had come to the interview with his pencil device. He had come prepared. The street is tree-lined, and no two houses in this interwar garden suburb are alike. Birds shrill, and retired folk and housewives potter and stoop in their gardens, readying for the summer. He looks at his map and turns left and right again, crossing the green and weaving away to the outer skin of the unreality of the estate, until he can see the clock tower that stands proudly at the head of Wavertree High Street, leading to the city proper. Now he sees what he wants, his first CCTV camera. Gone are the curtain twitches, here are the mechanical eyes. He refers to the master sketch of the security web that Alicia Flint's DC had given him, and he ticks off each camera from here all the way to the railway station. Whenever and wherever possible, Zoe Bright took the train rather than the bus. as borne out by the contents of her bin and by her husband. When he gets to the station, Staffe sees that by changing once and travelling under the Mersey, then getting a bus, he can get to Parkgate in just over an hour. He buys his ticket and calls into Flint's DC with the coordinates of the coded CCTV positions. He gives the date and time frame of Zoe Bright's disappearance. He can't help feeling that the real key to this case is that unholy pair Vernon Short and Leslie Crawford. Or must he simply dig so deep into Kerry Degg and Zoe Bright's pasts that the truth will emerge like drilled oil? The unwelcome truth, he knows, is that sometimes you have to engage as deeply as you can on each and every front of inquiry until a theory becomes untenable. For now, much as he is beginning to miss his own city, he gets the train, changes, and then a bus. Zoe might have been seen on the streets here in Parkgate. She might have been with somebody that day. He takes out the carton Zoe chose to cling onto, the potted shrimp and ice cream tubs, somehow harking back to a previous age, a childhood in which he was never fully indulged. His phone goes, and it is an unknown number. "Sorry, Chief, they only keep the video data for 3 days," says the DC. "Shit," says Staffe. "You know how many CCTV cameras we have, and someone's got to watch the stuff." "Someone watches it all?" "Well, they fast-forward it. Up to 24 times. That's an hour to cover a day. We got 60 cameras. Do the maths." "And is anything kept?" "Too right. Just the juice, though." "And that day, between midday and 4 in the afternoon, the 3 cameras I told you about?" "Well, they're all on Grievo's watch. I can't tell if he's saved anything or not. You can ask him. He's in tomorrow." "Get hold of him." "He's on leave." "Get hold of him and give him my number." Staffe hangs up, looks across at the Welsh hills. There should be sea between here and them. Instead, a silted estuary with marshes and sandbanks. A different country altogether. Parkgate's promenade is flanked on one side by a fine terrace of mid-19th century houses, and on the other by wrought iron. But beyond the railings, where there should be a beach and a sea, there is only grass. The sea is gone. The pub is called The Ship, and there is an old-fashioned fish and chip restaurant, a cafe that would have been a Lyons or Forte in its day, an ice cream parlour, and a shrimp and cockle shack. But no sea. Gulls are above and salt is in the air, and no sound of surf, nor the rattle of shingle beneath the tide. The trippers have come nonetheless, and they cluster against the dry breeze, stabbing their cockle and whelk tubs with thin blades of wood. They lick at ice cream, and Staffe follows the trail. Goes into the shrimp shack, checking the livery on the empty tub he purloined from Zoe's house. This is the place. He shows the youth behind the counter his warrant card, and the queue disperses. The boy tells Staffe, "I fucking done nowt. You lost me them customers." Staffe holds the photograph of Zoe up and sees the youth instantly clam up, tight as a live shell. "I think she used to come here maybe every couple of weeks. So if you don't tell me when you last saw her, I'll bring you in, all the way across the water, and then you'll have no fucking customers for the whole day, maybe longer." "I haven't seen her," says the youth. Staffe shuts the door, turns the sign around to show closed to the outside. He picks a tub of potted shrimps from the counter and leaves a $5, sits on a low 3-legged stool and stabs the buttered flesh. It melts in his mouth, tastes of a near shore. He lets the shrimp go its own way and spears another and another, savouring each and every one. Traces of mace enrich the flesh. He takes out a tenner and takes 2 more pots. "You don't know what you've got here," he says to the youth.
But I don't like him.
Sick of the sight? Staffe looks up at him. I'm only trying to help her.
She's in trouble.
You could help save her.
She never says much,
says the youth. She come with a friend? The youth shakes his head. He has dry skin that flakes around his eyebrows and on his forehead and chin.
I only seen her on her own. She looks sad.
She'd come on a certain day?
Sunday mornings most often.
But not last Sunday? He shakes his head again. And not with her husband?
She got a husband.
Why wouldn't she? Says Staffe.
He must like roll mops then, the husband.
Why'd you say that?
She always took roll mops wrapped. She'd have the shrimp for herself like you, but she said she can't abide roll mops. That's what she said.
Give me a couple of roll mops, says Staffe, thinking it might brighten Anthony's day for an instant. Staffe's phone goes and he stands, leans on the counter, and the youth takes a step back as if he might catch something. Outside, a line of 5 people has formed, waiting for the shop to reopen.
They come from miles around, says the youth.
Inspector Wagstaff? It's Sergeant Greaves. I'm on leave. 2nd of April. Between 1 and 4 o'clock. I'm looking for a woman on cameras WH3, 4 and 5. Hang on a second. Staffe takes his herrings and the shrimp and leaves the money. Winks at the youth as he turns the sign back round on his way out. The woman is Zoe Bright. You'll have heard of her, I'm sure.
I know her all right. At least I do now.
The phone goes quiet, fills up with background chatter as if Greaves is outside a pub, and Staffe can tell he is smoking, breathing heavily. What's wrong, Greaves?
I don't know. I can't be sure. I didn't know it was her then. How could I?
You saw her?
I didn't wipe it. I kept it. Christ, I didn't twig it was her.
You kept the tape?
I'm sure I did. This one was with an old fella. Having a ruck they were, I'd set to. Not to blows like, but waving their arms. She kind of pushed him and he was trying to grab her, trying to hold her like. That's why I paused it. Looked like it might develop, you know.
An old fella?
Old enough to be our father, I'd say.
It has become a beautiful day, and the gulls have come up the estuary to feed on what the visitors discard. A line of Scandinavians forms outside the seafood shack now, mostly wearing the red replica tops of Liverpool Football Club. They spill onto the road like an isthmus, almost as far as the low wall of the faux prom. Staffe wishes he could surrender to the day, let it take him like a tide, and maybe book into a guest house. Look out across the marshes to the Welsh hills, and lose himself in a book. Iris Murdoch, perhaps, or Toni Morrison. He slips away from the crowd. Far away to his left, where the estuary meets what he thinks must be Cheshire, he can make out a sprawling industrial complex which rises from the distant horizon like a cold steel city. He squints, brings into focus tall and thin tubular chimneys which expectorate. He turns back towards the Welsh hills. A long plume of mist comes in from where the sea must be. It works its way into a fold in the hills, like giant parted thighs. A heron flies directly towards him, its giant wings flapping slowly. It arcs away, head high, towards a copse of trees way down on a swathe of high grasses. There, amongst the trees, he sees a red-brick Victorian building. He thinks it might be a water tower, where the sea once was. How strange. And he wonders if those same Victorians had done something to drive the estuary away, whether they had gone engineering mad.
End of Disc 3.